leading Britain's conversation with Nigel Farage.
Well, would you believe it? Chuka Ramuna's parliamentary committee looking into migrants and whether they're integrating has said today that migrants should learn English before they arrive in the United Kingdom or be given compulsory language lessons once they're here. This the very same Chuka Ramuna who absolutely slated and condemned me when I said I was on a train surrounded by people that couldn't speak the language and wondered what on earth was going on in my country. Has the centre of gravity shifted on this debate? I think the answer to that is undoubtedly yes. The question for you is this Parliamentary Committee report today a force for good or a force for bad? Is Chuka Ramuna now on the right track or not? Call me on 0345 6060 973 and give me your answer. Well, I could scarcely believe it, because, as I say, back in 2013, I made a comment about being on a train leaving Charing Cross, and I said it wasn't until we got 4 or 5 stops down the line into sort of outer suburbia that I heard anyone around me speaking English. And I said that I felt that some parts of the country were frankly unrecognisable because we weren't able to converse with each other in the same language. Well, you can imagine, of course, that all sorts of things were said about me, including specifically by Chuka Ramuna, who said to me on Question Time back in 2014, "You are letting this debate descend into something that is quite nasty and quite ugly." It was as if somehow I shouldn't really even be talking about the issue. And it wasn't just then. Again and again and again, Chuka Ramuna has attacked me, has said basically I've got a horrible agenda, I don't recognise modern Britain. And at the time, his modern Britain was a modern Britain where, in our big cities, there were sections where people spoke completely different languages. But today, the all-party parliamentary group on social integration has a report out saying migrants should learn English before they come, and if not, be given compulsory lessons. It backs up in many ways the Casey report. Dame Louise Casey, do you remember, just a few weeks ago, had a report on social integration, and she talked about areas such as suburbs of Oldham, where people who'd been in the country perhaps for 20 or 30 years weren't speaking the language, and she said in terms of integration, in terms of people getting on together, that was a disaster. And I think it's very interesting. I think that even Vince Cable today, I mean, I can scarcely believe this, even Vince Cable today questioned the EU's free movement of people. Now, I think that the centre of gravity on this debate really has shifted fundamentally, and it's not going back. You know, my view is that realism has now taken over this debate, and we're realising that if we live in an increasingly divided community, that leads to more radicalisation, it leads to more problems, and worst of all, it leads to more resentment. And that is the last thing that any of us that supported the Brexit side, when we argued for border controls, the last thing any of us wanted was for this to be a situation where, frankly, we would stir up between different ethnic communities unpleasantness. We don't want any of that. What we want to do is live in a country where we all get along together, respect each other's different cultures and traditions, but we all speak the same language. So I'm amazed by what Chuka Ramuna has done today. I haven't heard him go any further. He hasn't said anything nice about me yet, but I think he's heading in the right direction. Although, is it right that a government should make people compulsorily take English lessons? I'm not sure. I wonder what Stephen in Welwyn Garden City thinks.
Hello, Nigel. First, please let me say it's a pleasure to speak to you, my first time, and I'd like to thank you, number one, for ensuring that we got the referendum to start with, and number two, for helping us win it. So congratulations.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you. And one of the key arguments was that we were bringing too many people in too quickly for proper social integration to happen.
Yes. Well, the thing is, as I was saying to the producer, I lived for 5 years in Japan, the early part of this 21st century.
Yeah.
Now, part of their rules and regulations were to fingerprint and photo migrants like myself that were temporarily going to work in Japan. And it's the first time in my life I've ever been fingerprinted. And, us foreigners, expats, are sitting in this equivalent of the Home Office in Yokohama thinking, well, do they think we've come here to burgle? But no, it was their rule. They wanted all foreigners to be fingerprinted, photographed, and have an ID card. So I had one. I accepted that I was a visitor in their country and I had to adapt to their ways. Now, regarding language, I took it upon myself to enroll for a course in Japanese, but it's slightly ironic in that most Japanese people, as you know, because you're well-travelled, most Japanese people can speak English and they want to engage in speaking our language to an English-speaking country person, either us or an Aussie or something.
And how, Stephen, how did you get on with the Japanese lessons? Tell me.
Pretty good. I enrolled at a YMCA, actually, and it was a slow pace. They dictated there were like 3 different alphabetic forms, and so it can get tough, but we persisted, and I think most of us in our class, we were all Brits, Americans, based on Commonwealth, the English-speaking world, basically.
Yeah.
And I think most of us persisted, but there was no compulsion, but we felt, well, we had to, live in Rome. And can I just say one quick thing, but not language-related, but it was being part of my community. In every block, as the Americans would say, there was something outside your door about once a week with a clipboard with information on. And it was something to do with, self-defense, like if there was an earthquake, not self-defense, what do you call it?
Civil defense, yeah.
Yeah. Like, if there was an earthquake, please all assemble at so-and-so park, and there was something like there's a kid's fate on next Saturday week. Well, some of that wouldn't concern me in the least, but some of it might. And one Brit said to me, well, don't bother with all that, because it's meant for the locals. And I said, yes, but for the time I'm here, I am one of the locals. I mean, if there's a flipping earthquake in Yokohama and I'm living there...
You want to know about it, yeah. Yeah. No, well, Stephen, you've done the right thing. I mean, I think one of the criticisms of Brits abroad is probably particularly on the Costa del Sol, is that you get whole communities of British people who never even attempt to learn Spanish. And I'm a little guilty on this, having spent quite a lot of time in France and in Belgium. My French is nowhere near as good as it should be. It's all right, but it's nowhere near as good as it should be, because the problem I faced over there, just as you did in Japan, is actually they all want to practice their English on you, or their English actually is pretty much as good as ours. But, Stephen, I think you did exactly the right thing. And at last, we have a parliamentary committee that think that's what should happen here. And I think it's a good thing. But I'm very keen to hear from callers who maybe think it's a bad thing, maybe think the government's overdoing it. Maybe you think that actually this country culturally is richer if we have sections of our cities where people speak different languages. It does matter. It is important. And I want you to call me, please, on 0345 60 60 973, to text to 84850, to tweet at LBC, and you can follow this programme on lbc.co.uk. And next we go to Jamie in Chester. Jamie, what do you think about migrants being forced to learn the English language?
Hi, Nigel. I'm going to try and take both sides of this debate at the same time.
OK.
Because I do think it is important for immigrants who come to this country that they speak English, because, putting it bluntly, you cannot integrate into an English society without speaking English. But on the other hand, I think that your train example that you referred to, your quote from a few years ago, is talking about something different.
Yeah.
Because even if an immigrant comes to this country and speaks English, there is nothing to stop them, and indeed they shouldn't be stopped, from speaking their own language to each other. So in your example, none of those immigrants were speaking to you, they were speaking to each other. So I've got something in common with you in that my wife is European, she's Dutch. I appreciate yours comes from somewhere close. And therefore my daughter is half Dutch.
Yeah.
We will speak Dutch, and I expect my wife and my daughter to speak Dutch together when they're out of the house or in the house, but they will speak English when they're speaking to English people. And I think that's how you ensure integration, but you also gain the benefit from multiculturalism. So I think both are important. I think that the immigrants should have to speak English. They should learn it. But also they shouldn't be discouraged from speaking their own language and adhering to their own culture.
No. Or, indeed, practising their own religion and all the rest of it. No, JB, I do understand that point, and actually you straddled both sides of the argument pretty well. The point that I was making was that actually there were very, very large numbers of people who weren't learning English at all in the country. And indeed, the place where I saw this most starkly was in Oldham, where there was a by-election last year. And not me, but a lady called Helen Pidd, who is the northern correspondent for The Guardian, said she went to a particular district and a particular street in Oldham, and she said door after door told us they were voting Labour. Not one of them knew who Jeremy Corbyn was. Not one of them could speak a single word of English. So, Jamie, that's what I was talking about. I was talking about the fact that there are communities who not only have not learnt English, but appear to have really rather refused to learn English. And the argument, Jamie, I'm making is that if you have that situation, you are likely to have a lot of bad feeling build up within a town or a city. And I hope that point you would agree with.
Well, I do, actually, yes. I mean, there are quite a number of things that I disagree with you on, but I do agree with that if those sorts of communities, and there's nothing wrong with them sort of gathering together and being in the same place, but if they don't speak English, they're going to find it difficult to integrate with people outside their community. And all communities have to be able to do that, whether they're in this country or you're looking at the wider world. So I agree that they do have to speak,
yes,
to integrate.
Yes, and we want the kids from all communities playing football together or being in the park together and conversing with each other, because it is through younger generations actually that barriers can get broken down incredibly quickly, because children just don't care, do they? They're not really interested in differences that adults may have more reservations about. Kids just look at people as people, and if they speak the same language, there's every chance they're going to get on fine. Jamie, thank you for your very considered call. I'm Nigel Farage on LBC. The time is 10:15.
LBC. This is LBC. Head home with Ian Dale at Drive.
I think this whole process has got to be driven by politicians who actually believe in Brexit, because I don't believe there is almost a single person who works in the diplomatic service who actually believes in Brexit. Theresa May, I think, has proven that you don't actually have to be an ardent Brexiteer to be effective in this.
Head home with Ian Dale at Drive. Only on LBC.
Interest. If you're not getting much of a return on your savings, speak to Cufflink. Cufflink is not a bank, but are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. You can lend your money with theirs into bricks and mortar. With Cufflink, you can get between 5 and 7.2% gross interest per annum. Talk to Cufflink at lendingtogether.co.uk and do something with your money. Past returns are not necessarily a guide to future returns. Your capital may be at risk.
From working 9 to 5... to working on your tan. Experience the best of Asia, Australia and New Zealand with Singapore Airlines. With great fares to Thailand, the Philippines, Australia and more, there's no better time to plan your next getaway. Book now at singaporeair.com. Singapore Airlines, a great way to fly.
The BT Great January sale on broadband, TV and mobile is now on. With savings of up to 33%. Get a great deal on the UK's most powerful Wi-Fi signal versus major broadband providers. An exceptional price with our top TV package and superb offers on our award-winning SIMs and smartphone plans. Don't miss up to 33% off in the BT Great January sale. Join today. Visit bt.com/sale.
Offer ends 31st of January 2017. New customers. BT Infinity 83% UK coverage. Subject to availability. Terms apply.
I was quite out of sorts before I did my tax return. When I looked in the mirror, all I would see were grey hairs. But you see, now it's done, I'm feeling good. And this silver fox is ready to purr.
You too can find inner peace. Do your tax return online by the 31st of January and avoid a £100 penalty. go to gov.uk/self-assessment and don't forget to pay what you owe.
And now, the rest of that true story from Aldermartin, Baines and Cuthbert. After a fire at a residential development in 2015, the insurance loss adjusters were looking for an excuse not to pay out. But the experienced input and correct health and safety paperwork provided by ABC meant that a full and satisfactory settlement was quickly negotiated. No fuss, no hassle. For block management, ABC Estates will give your story an ending that'll make you as happy as Larry. Find out more at abcestates.co.uk or call 0800 888 6688.
Nigel Farage on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Chuka-Ramuna's Parliamentary Committee says migrants should learn English before they come here. If they don't, they'll have to be compulsory lessons. Is the national debate moving in the right direction? Will this help us solve the problems of social integration? Or are we getting too hung up on this? Does it matter if we all speak the same language? And your texts and tweets coming in on this. This one I like. Chuka is fearing for his career. Him and his friends have realised how out of touch they are. I can't believe it took them so long to realise that speaking the language is so important if you wish to be part of society. Another one. Didn't Ed Miliband suggest English classes in the run-up to the 2015 election? Not the first time Labour MPs have put it out there. True, but it was just a suggestion. The point about today is there's an element of compulsion, which is something that British governments actually don't often do. I wonder what Rashpaul in Chiswick thinks of this.
Oh, good afternoon to you, Mr. Farage.
Hello.
I must confess I am feeling nervous talking to such an important guy. If I sound rather iffy, do forgive me.
You don't sound iffy at all, and I can assure you I'm not that important, but I'm very keen. I'm very keen to hear what your experience of this has been.
Well, let me begin with to wish you a very happy New Year.
And to you.
And thank you for taking my call.
No.
Now, I believe houses and countries are no different. Houses have doors, countries have borders. And if anybody is coming to your house, I believe, and I submit, that they must adhere by your rules and regulations. And that could be take your shoes off, or you bring some gift, or you eat with them, cook with them, speak their language. And I cannot really believe if people go to other parts of the world, why do they not take something into account that they're going to somebody else's house? And I believe if they do that, there will be less tension amongst people. I say this because when I came to this country, I go back many, many years, and I am...
What year was this, Rashpaul?
65.
65, yeah.
And I was interviewed by the British Embassy in Delhi.
Yeah.
And the lady who saw me, she said to me, you speak good English, but you have to improve on it. And I cannot believe why those very officials are allowing people to come to this country who do not wish to integrate and do not want to speak a language which is international language. Now, I am considering going to Poland in the next 2 years. And I have already started learning Polish now.
Well done,
and when
you.
I do speak to Polish people in this country, they are chuffed. They feel so happy that I'm able to say thank you. I'm able to say to them bye-bye. I'm able to say to them, how are you? I'm able to order something. And I am not there yet. I'm going to go there in about 2 years' time. And I cannot understand. Maybe I'm stupid. That why people come to England, United Kingdom, which is, I believe, is one of the best countries in the world. That is why I live here. Why would I come here in the first place if this country was no good?
Well,
Therefore,
you are, Rashpaul, you are an example to everybody. You know, you've learnt English, you're now getting on a little bit in years, and you're learning Polish. But what is so interesting to me is that when you came here in 1965, you had an interview, and they made sure that you were the right person to come to this country and that you had sufficient language skills. You see, what's interesting is from sort of 1950, and we all know about Windrush and the West Indies, but from about 1950 until 2000, we had a very sensible immigration policy in this country. It ran right throughout that period, net at about 30,000 people a year. And as you experienced, we were being careful to make sure that people would be able to get on. And it's been since the year 2000, Rashpal, that we threw open the borders, not just to Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, but actually to the rest of the world as well. And I think we've really rather lost our way. And I'm hoping, and I believe that the centre of gravity on this debate has shifted. I think for those of us that have tried to push it there, it's been pretty rough and tough. And I think we're now heading into a period of realism where I hope in years to come, those that come to this country, like you, have made an effort, have got language skills, and bring as much to us as you have. And Rashpal, I thank you for your charm, and I thank you very much indeed for the call. More texts and tweets. Very interesting one here. I learned Urdu for a year at college so that I could speak to the old-timers on my street. They came in the 1960s and still don't speak any English. And that's from Graham in Bradford. Another one, I made a comment about Brits in Spain not bothering to learn Spanish, and this has come in. When Brits live in Spain, expats, they are not looking for work usually and taking nothing from the system. Understandable as they wish to play golf or sunbathe instead of learning Spanish, Jane in Wapping. Well, yeah, that's true. But I would have thought, kind of a few words of Spanish when you go and buy the local newspapers or something might be helpful. Matthew in Folkestone, what do you make of this language conundrum?
Nigel. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say congratulations on being the LBC ambassador for Europe and now the US. And if Theresa May doesn't want you, and I'm sure you're going to do a great job.
Well, that's very kind of you.
But basically, the language issue. I mean, I'm a commercial pilot, and years ago I've been flying to France, and there's actually a rule saying when a French air traffic controller is talking with a French pilot, they've got to actually talking in their native tongue in French. And but luckily for us, the international language around the whole world, I don't know if you're aware, is English.
Yeah.
But I've had incidents where I've sort of flown into Le Bourget Airport on a small cargo plane, and I've had the air traffic controller trying to talk English and actually mixing up left and right, and I've actually had to go back to him and confirm, do you mean droite, gauche, to make sure, because, they've told me instead of turning right to turn left, and when you got Charles de Gaulle Airport just nearby, it's not that safe.
No, absolutely. And interestingly, Matthew, I've got a little story about this. I was in the Market Square in Peterborough in 2009, and I met a young woman there, and she was 16. She'd left school, and she told me she'd refused a job on a packing line just outside Peterborough, where they were putting kind of cellophane around, broccoli and things like that, using hydraulics and production lines. And she'd been refused a job because she couldn't speak Polish. And that story at the time made quite a big story, on national news. And it just seemed to me that, they were using the same argument as French air traffic control, that if you're using machinery and things that can do harm, you have to speak the same language. It just struck me as being a bit odd that in Peterborough you couldn't get a job because you didn't speak Polish, That's how it seemed to me.
Yeah, but with another incident in France, luckily I wasn't involved with, but there was a UK cargo plane taking off from Charles de Gaulle Airport, and there was a French airliner taking off with football supporters going to Spain. I think this is going back sort of quite a few years now, about maybe 8 years ago, and the French controller was talking with the French pilot in French, and unfortunately the British pilot in this small cargo plane wasn't aware that they cleared this airliner to take off, and he actually lined up on the intersection of the runway, and that was actually a fatal accident. The British pilot lost his life.
Yeah.
But, so I think it's important that it has to work both ways.
Communication matters, Matthew, at all levels. Thank you. We move next to Stephen in Chichester. Stephen, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Farage.
Hi.
I agree with you that immigrants should learn English and that they should speak English fluently to the people here to integrate properly. My question to you is that seeing as you spent over decades of your life in Brussels. Do you know fluent French, German, Flemish?
I haven't lived in Brussels. I live in Kent. I go to Ebbsfleet in the morning.
You've never lived in Brussels?
No.
You've never stayed in a flat in Brussels?
Once or twice. Well, I mean, a couple of nights a month at most. But I've never lived in Brussels, no. I generally...
You've been an MEP for 20 years, though, haven't you?
17, 18. Generally, when I go, to Brussels, I will get the Eurostar, the first Eurostar in the morning, bright and early from Ebbsfleet. It takes an hour and 40 minutes, which actually is quicker than getting into London from parts of Sussex these days. And I will be picked up by the Parliament cars, go into the building, spend the day in the building, and go back on Eurostar. So I've never really spent a huge amount of time there. But having said that, Stephen, I do regret I don't speak French better than I do. I speak it manageably. I understand it reasonably. But it is amazing that the dominance of English now virtually everywhere, has reached a point where it's actually quite difficult to learn languages in Northern Europe. Scandinavia being another example. So, Stephen, the answer is I would like to speak French better than I do. I do make an effort. I do try. I do attempt. And generally just about get there. But I've never actually lived in that country. Now, coming up soon, we're going to be talking to LBC's US correspondent Simon Marks, because there is news on the courting of Donald Trump. It would seem that my visit to meet Mr. Trump, or visits, according to some rumours, have made Downing Street feel a little bit edgy. After all, they don't want me to be the UK's ambassador in Washington. So a story broke today that two of Theresa May's senior aides had been to meet Team Trump, and we'll find out the truth of that soon. But right now, I'm Nigel Farage, here on LBC. It's 10:30, and here with the news headlines is Zora Suleiman.
The Prime Minister will travel to the United States to meet Donald Trump next month. Senior aides to Theresa May flew out to meet the President-elect's team in December. Mr. Trump will become the new president in 15 days' time. Two passengers have been warned to prepare for a severely reduced service as talks aimed at stopping a 24-hour London Underground strike ended without agreement again. The walkout starts on Sunday night and will continue through Monday. Most Zone 1 stations, including Victoria, London Bridge and Euston, are likely to be closed. And 4 people have been charged with hate crimes and kidnapping a person with special needs and streaming a vicious attack online. The 4 black suspects are accused of beating and taunting a white man via Facebook. LBC's weather: rain in northern parts into the evening, dry elsewhere with some frost, a low of -2 degrees.
This is LBC.
What if your weekly family shop could take you on your annual family holiday? What if your daily commute could help you go somewhere rather more interesting? What if topping up your car could help you top up your tan? With the British Airways American Express credit card, your purchases will earn you Avios that could really take you places. Search BA Amex to find out more. Representative 22.9% APR variable. Applicants must be 18 or over. Approval subject to status. Conditions and exclusions apply.
There are some office essentials you just can't live without. Get them all at Staples. Right now, there's 50% off the second ink cartridge when you buy 2 of the same. Buy 1 ink cartridge and get the second half price. Stock up and save on your ink cartridges today. Staples. Make more happen.
Estate agents? Who are they to tell you what to do? If you want to sell your home fast, for cash, speak to Property Rescue. There are no middlemen, just a genuine cash sale, which means you could exchange within 48 hours. I know, unbelievable. So, middlemen, speak to Property Rescue. They're buying houses all over Britain. Go to propertyrescue.co.uk. Property Rescue. Problem solved.
An African safari, a Mediterranean tour, a Caribbean escape. Discover new destinations for 2017 at the Telegraph Travel Show from Friday the 13th to Sunday the 15th of January at XL London. Meet travel companies, tourist boards, and hear from travel experts Michael Portillo, John Craven, Stanley Johnson, Ronan Keating, and many more. Tickets include entry to the Telegraph Cruise Show and London Boat Show. Book now at telegraph.co.uk/travel show.
In a city where enemies of the internet try to ruin people's surfing, streaming, and downloading, they needed a hero. They needed Lego Batman.
No, the new Sky Broadband Tech Team.
What? I have my own tech team. Actually, it's just Alfred.
We're specially trained to resolve most broadband problems online or on the phone.
Oh yeah, well, I'm specially trained in everything.
We'll even visit your home if needed.
I'll drop in even when not needed.
Do you always have the last word?
Obviously, I'm Batman.
Introducing the new Sky Broadband Tech Team. Their dedicated experts ensure you get the best customer service in town. Sky, believe in better.
Ofcom Quality of Customer Service Report 2016 excludes Highlands and Islands. Further terms apply.
Last word.
This is LBC with Nigel Farage. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
Two of the most powerful people in this country work as senior political advisors in number 10 Downing Street. You may or may not have heard of them. One is called Nick Timothy, the other is called Fiona Hill. They are Theresa May's senior special advisors. And the story that broke earlier on this evening on a US newswire is that Theresa May sent her two closest allies on a secret trip in the middle of December to meet Donald Trump's advisors. Bringing us more on this story is Simon Marks, LBC's US correspondent. Good evening, Simon.
Hello, Nigel. Am I allowed formally to welcome you to LBC?
You certainly are, dear boy. Absolutely. Thank you. Now, tell me, what's the truth of this story? What happened? What do we know?
Well, I almost feel like I should be asking you the questions, but here's what we know so far.
Very good.
And, all the information is only coming out of Downing Street at this point. We've heard nothing from Team Trump up at Trump Tower there in New York City to confirm the story that Downing Street has put out tonight, saying that the stage is set for Theresa May to meet Donald Trump, we presume here in Washington, next month, shortly after the inauguration. We know that according to Downing Street sources, the aforementioned Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill held meetings with members of Mr. Trump's transition team sometime last month. I don't know if those meetings took place in Trump Tower. You're obviously more familiar with the back and forth at Trump Tower than I am, but it's quite possible that the reporters camped out in the lobby at Trump Tower simply didn't recognize them when they went into the building. There have been so many comings and goings there, and of course not everybody entering Trump Tower is entering the building in order to meet Donald Trump's team, because there's all sorts of other business that goes on in that building. But apparently the meeting took place, the agreement was struck according to Downing Street sources, and Theresa May will become one of the first international leaders to visit the United States and meet Donald Trump after the inauguration. They've certainly got no shortage of things to discuss. Principal among them, of course, the timetable for any kind of trade negotiations that may take place in order to establish a UK-US trade deal once Britain leaves the European Union. But I suppose in more general terms, they've also got to establish a relationship, because Donald Trump and Theresa May, I think they've made two phone calls to one another since the president-elect's success in last November's election, but they really don't have any kind of relationship yet on which to build. So
No, but Simon,
it's a pretty basic thing.
It's worse than that, Simon, isn't it? I mean, Nick Timothy, one of the people sent on this mission, tweeted in the last couple of months of a Trump campaign, as a Tory, I don't want any reaching out to Trump. And Fiona Hill, who went with him on this mission to try and charm Team Trump, simply said during the campaign, Donald Trump is a chump. It doesn't strike me as being a very good starting place. And I would put it to you that actually anybody that walked into Trump Tower through those front doors and went to the desk next to those lifts would have been photographed. I mean, as you know...
They may well have been, yes.
Yes,
that's absolutely true.
There's a bank of photographers and journalists there all day long. I mean, when I walked in, they recognised me, I can tell you. But even if they didn't know, initially, who Nick Timothy was. I don't think it would have taken very long, do you, for this story to have got out?
That's hard to know, because there is, just to explain to people the way this works, the reporters camped out in that lobby are part of what's known as the transition pool. There is, set up by the White House Correspondents Association, this rostered pool of reporters who sit there all day long, and they do monitor the comings and goings of people going in and out of that building. And actually, I receive those pool reports almost hourly at the moment from those reporters in Trump Tower, and often they don't recognise people going in. So on a fairly regular basis, they do put photographs out, and they appeal to other reporters to provide information about who those people may have been. But look, this is all part and parcel of a recalibration that's taking place within Number 10. We've seen the British ambassador here, Sir Kim Darroch, who before the election was describing Donald Trump as an outsider and an unknown quantity. He wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post a few days ago praising what he called Mr. Trump's historic and impressive win. And I think it's also fair to say, look, the British government is not alone. There are many foreign governments that did not establish relationships with Donald Trump during the presidential campaign, as they might normally have been expected to do. And those foreign governments, like the British government, are now in a frenzy trying to establish relationships because they know he's going to be in charge for the next 4 years.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think the British ambassador, I think that Downing Street, I think half our cabinet ministers are desperately playing catch-up. Simon, thank you very much indeed, and I will see you in Washington for the inauguration in a couple of weeks' time.
We look forward to it, Nigel.
Look forward to it. I'll see you there. Well, I think I've sussed that story out now, having spoken to Simon Marks. Clearly, as the news report said, they went to New York and to Washington. My guess is, I think it's almost impossible that they could have gone into Trump Tower. Somebody would have recognised that photograph. It sounds to me like they went to Washington. They might have met either the existing State Department or perhaps some of Trump's transition team down there. And it seems to me that whatever spin Number 10 are trying to put on this tonight, that frankly, we are no nearer officially having a close relationship with Trump's team than we were before this story broke, which I consider to be a shame. But we are discussing Chuka Umunna, and we're discussing his parliamentary committee, which said today, surprise, surprise, migrants should speak English, and if they don't, we will compulsorily make sure that they can. And I've been asking the question, does this mean the national debate is moving in the right direction? I think it does. But perhaps you're going to tell me we're all getting a bit too hung up on this, and that actually having sections of our communities that speak completely different languages and can't talk to each other, that somehow culturally that enriches us and makes us better. I don't believe it, but if you do, please call me and tell me. And I'm going to go to Abbas in Redbridge to see what he makes of this.
Hi there, good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
Thanks for getting me on. Nigel, I think some of your views I do find somewhat skewed and, rather narrow-minded,
Go on.
Especially when it comes to, for example, when you talk about language skills, the angle that I'm coming from, I totally agree that whenever you go to any country, it's paramount that you learn the language to the best of your ability because, of course, that will help you to communicate, to integrate, and make life a lot easier for not just yourself, but obviously people who you'll be dealing with from a day-to-day basis. That's the angle that I'm coming from. And as a Muslim, in fact, one of the principles that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said is that when you're in a group of people, speak the language that is common to everyone, so people would not be suspicious of you in terms of that you might be talking about them. So that's a principle within even the Islamic tradition, for example.
Okay.
So that's the angle that I'm coming from. I think it's a very important thing. However, I do believe that at times, sometimes the language is rather robust and unsympathetic, especially when, you've already mentioned Spain. I've been to Saudi Arabia. I've been to Dubai, to Oman. I've been to places in Africa, and people sometimes have been there for decades, and they don't speak a word of Arabic, and they're not interested to learn Arabic. And they've been there for 12 or 15 years. Now, I'm not saying two wrongs make a right, but I'm just saying let's have a bit of a balance there.
Abbas, be fair. be fair, I did say I was critical of our communities that have emigrated and live abroad and haven't even attempted to learn a few common pleasantries. I mean, I do agree with you on that. But Abbas, there was that text that I read out from the fella in Bradford saying there are people in his street who've been in Britain since the 1960s who don't speak the English language. And what the Casey report a couple of months ago was saying is that if communities are divided in every way, included by language in our big cities, and we don't have integration, we have distrust. And so I'm trying not to be narrow-minded. I'm trying, I think, to adopt a bit of common sense here.
Nigel, the issue here is this. I would agree with these type of reports because they highlight issues and problems, and of course we should all work together and resolve these issues and problems. But however, you have to look at it from all sides, not just from one side. I remember around 20-odd years, 25 years ago, my mother decided. I was born in Penn, southeast London. We were the only two Asian families in the entire school. I had no problems about racism within London. It was a real bubble. I only realised when my mother thought, let's go and live in Batley, which is about 10 miles from Bradford.
Yeah.
And my mother looked for a house to rent in a predominantly white area because that's what we had done in London. We never thought we should live in an Asian area or a black area or any other area, just a good area. And the amount of abuse that we got just whilst we were looking at the house, dirty packies, go home, you dirty packies, go home. My mother decided, I think for her own safety, I was only about 12, 13 years old, my mother decided it would be probably better to go and live in an Asian area because living in this type of an area, my kids are going to get beaten up from school every day and be told how they're dirty packies and they should go home. And so what you've got to realise, Nigel, is that a lot of the times integration is not just a consequence of foreigners not wanting to integrate with society here, but it's a reluctance of society here wanting to integrate with those people.
I think there is some truth. Abbas, I think there is some truth in that, but I think there is some truth in that in a sense that what a lot of people have said in big cities is, why has this fundamental change taken place without anybody ever asking us? I do understand that. However, I would say this to you, that if you compare attitudes in this country, I think we are miles ahead of all the other countries in Europe when it comes to, certainly 15, 20 years ago, the levels of integration, the levels of tolerance, the levels of respect for different faiths, different creeds. I think this country was head and shoulders above the rest of Europe on it. And it is a great shame that we've seen a decline in that situation. And I've argued all the way through that irresponsible open-door immigration has been the problem, and that if people don't speak the language, it just makes it worse. That's all I'm arguing. But no, listen, I do take the points that you've made, and clearly, when you did move to that particular part of the north, it was a terrible shock for you and your family, and a horrible thing. And thank you very much indeed for your call. It's 10:45. I'm Nigel Farage, here on LBC.
This is LBC. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
According to Tony Blair, this is all wrong. It's a new populism. And as far as he's concerned, it needs to be combated with almost £10 million of his own money. Lance Price is former Labour Party communications director and former advisor to Tony Blair.
I think what he's doing is seeking to strengthen the centre ground.
Let's bring Sir Bill back in on this.
Well, I've never heard such a load of tosh from Lance for a long time.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Every weekday morning from 7. Only on LBC.
It's amazing what you have at your fingertips. Emails, photos, banking. Yep, your smart devices keep getting smarter. But so do all those cyber criminals. They keep coming up with new ways to get at the personal things on your phone, tablet and computer. To keep them secure, always download the latest software and app updates. They contain important security upgrades which help protect your device from nasty viruses and hackers. Be cyber aware. Visit cyberaware.gov.uk.
Cancer is happening right now. Claire, a research nurse in Manchester, is working to beat cancer right now.
Just come out of clinic. It's been really nice because one of my patients just finished a clinical trial. It had shown some real positive results. They've got their daughter's wedding coming up. It looks like now that they can go and get their outfit, get the hat, but, being able to go in there with a lot more positive feelings.
We are working to beat cancer right now. Help us beat it sooner. Search Cancer Research UK to donate.
Sky Broadband Tech Team, how can I help?
It's Lego Batman. I'm having trouble uploading my dope tracks online.
It seems your back computer is disconnected. We'll sort it right away.
Sweet, the track is called Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Tell me you're recording this.
Only for quality and training purposes.
Sounded quality to me too, thank you.
Okay. Can I ask, is the Ethernet cable plugged into the back of your router?
Now that you mention it, no. I blame Alfred. Sweet, my track's uploaded. I'll send you the link.
No, it's fine, really. Just glad we could help.
I already sent it.
The Sky Broadband Tech Team are specially trained to resolve most broadband problems online or on the phone. It's all part of the service. Sky, believe in better.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
If you're planning to upgrade your car for 2017, now's the time to do it, because the Car Giant sale is on. Save time, save money, with up to 8,000 cars in stock at incredible prices. Giant choice, giant savings. The Car Giant sale, now on. Book a test drive at cargiant.co.uk.
It's how London buys its cars. Car Giant.
From Basel to beaches. Experience the best of Asia, Australia and New Zealand with Singapore Airlines. With great fares to Bali, Phuket, Sydney and more, there's no better time to plan your next getaway. Book now at singaporeair.com. Singapore Airlines, a great way to fly.
Nigel Farage on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
So Chuka Umuna's parliamentary committee says migrants must speak English when they come here, and if they don't, they'll be forced to learn it. Does this mean that Chuka Umuna has become a narrow-minded nationalist that wants the big state to impose its will upon people? Or do we think that perhaps Chuka Umuna is right and that the national debate is now moving in the right direction? And I'm going to ask Fred in East Sussex what he thinks.
Hello, Nigel.
Hello there.
Hello, Happy New Year.
And to you, what do you make of this?
I'd like to make 2 points. First, about just the general need for English proficiency when coming to the country, and also about Labour's attitude to it now.
Yep.
Well, in my experience, which granted isn't a lot since I'm still in the sixth form, I'm studying French at the moment. From what I understand, to study in France, you're virtually unable to get a job unless you speak French. And similarly with Australia, they require applicants for work visas to have vocational English. Same with Canada, English and French proficiency need to be spoken in both respects. And I think the reason why it's so important is because communities that are set up that don't have English proficiency end up, as you say, speaking their own language, and it creates microcultures which limits the ability to integrate within the UK, which is hugely important.
Yep, no, Fred, I have to say, personally, I would agree with that 100%.
And the thing I find interesting also with Chuka Umuna, and I'd like just your view on a bit after it, is I think the thing that you saw pushing forward the debate, especially towards Brexit, was that UKIP especially was hugely vilified for the views they put forward, such as the need for English proficiency. I think part of that was Labour trying to protect themselves against probably their failed immigration policy from 2004 roundabout. I think it was something like they estimated between 13,000 migrants per year.
Maximum 13,000 a year, yeah.
And ended up at 250,000. So I think the reason why there was such strong debate from Labour beforehand against measures such as these were they were trying to protect their own backs on their own failed policies. And I wonder why you think they've turned this around now.
Oh, listen, you're right, Fred. I mean, look, Chuka Umuna said, we've seen the party UKIP adopt the old slogans of the BNP. We've heard Nigel Farage, and he goes on and on and on. And there is interview after interview after interview, going back to 2013, where Chuka Umuna simply, personally attacks me. And yet the odd thing, Fred, is that today, despite the fact his report says all of the things using language much stronger that I used in 2013. I've never talked about, using compulsion to make people in this country attend classes and learn a language. So despite going much further than I went in 2013, today he still continues to go on attacking me. And I think, Fred, that they're doing this, they're saying this because they're scared for their jobs, they're scared for their careers, but Fred, I don't think that they really mean it. That's my view. And I thank you very much for your phone call. Next we go to Na in Bexley Heath. Good evening. Hello.
Good evening, Nigel. Hello, nice to talk to you. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, I'm a Mandarin interpreter and translator.
Right.
Yeah, hello. I knew you 2 years ago. Because of you, I fell out with my interpreter friend.
Did I?
Yeah. Because I invited them for a meal, 3 of them.
Yeah.
And they enjoyed my dumpling. But I said, my parents-in-law voted UKIP. Oh, they're so angry. They said I should divorce my husband. I didn't know what UKIP is. And then I knew a little bit about you. They told me I think that word is quite bad, Nazi or something.
Oh, all sorts of lovely things have been said. Oh, absolutely. Although maybe now, actually, we should be calling Chuckaramuna all sorts of unpleasant names.
They sent me a lot of social media. Like, I feel like Cultural Revolution. They attacked me. They told me I should divorce my husband and divorce my, Yeah, I knew you that time, but now, after this Brexit, I know you more, So nice to talk to you. I think, I'm an interpreter. I think it's a good idea everyone learn English, but it's very hard to implement because I work for Home Office. Everyone claims asylum. They don't have to speak English, because they said they got persecuted by their own country. That's why they come here.
Okay, now you raise a very important point, because there is a difference between people who come legally to settle, who perhaps we would class as economic migrants, and those who come as... And by the way, now, I don't like the term asylum seekers. I'd rather talk about refugees, because I think that, to me, really explains who these people are. So I think the argument, now, is very simple. It is that, of course, if there were genuine refugees that we were taking, then if people are genuinely fleeing in fear of direct persecution because of their ethnicity, because of their religion, because of their orientation, then I don't think for a minute even a hardliner like Chuckaramuna would suggest that they would have to speak English before they came in.
Genuine refugee? I don't know.
Well, I think you're raising a slightly you're raising a sort of bigger argument here. I mean the truth of it is that under the current asylum system, of those who get rejected, fewer than one in 4 are ever returned to anywhere. So I do take your point, but presumably, as you're an interpreter, you'd rather none of us spoke English. None of us coming into Britain spoke English, because you'd make more money, wouldn't you?
No, I feel we get paid less and less. Agency get paid more and more. Because, when I go to hospital before, they said, we pay £100 each hour. I said, I don't get paid much. I only get £16 per hour. So so all these big agents, they get paid lots of money. That's when Capital took over, when the guy sold the company to Capital, when they got the MOG contract, he sold the company for 30 million or something.
Yeah, I think we better not start talking about private companies getting involved in the public sector, firstly for legal reasons, and secondly because we'd all probably get very angry indeed. But now, listen, I thank you for your call, and I hope that there is a bit more tolerance shown towards you in terms of your views and who you like and who you don't like, and thank you very much indeed. And the last caller on this subject is going to be James in Germany. James, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel.
Yeah, what do you make of all this?
Well, I don't think it's just necessarily compulsory English lessons. I think making it compulsory would be very wrong anyway. But I think there's an attitude from British people now, given Brexit, given, all the things, one of the big pinnacle points of Brexit was all about immigration and the want to control our borders, and I completely see that the need to control our borders, absolutely. But, there's been such a shift towards, hating on immigrants, like, bloody immigrant and all this, that and the other. When actually, now we're going to leave Brexit, we should be looking to show what immigrants bring. I mean, I live in Germany, and when I moved here, I didn't speak a word of German.
Yeah.
And it was only through my appetite to learn and want to integrate with the local community where that I learned German, or a fair amount. I don't speak perfect German, but I can get by. And now I've got German friends and things. So I don't think it's just you must learn to speak English. I think it is give lessons, make them more affordable, make them more available, and encourage people to integrate in that way. But also, when we look at Brexit, we should be saying, well, this is what immigration has done for the UK over the past 5-10 years. You know what I mean?
Yes, I mean, look, what today represents, James, whether it's practical or not to do the things that Chuka Ramuna's report talked about, I don't know. But what is for certain is that it does mark, a very, very big shift in our national debate, and one that's pretty fundamental. And, overall, though, James, surely you agree, if we all speak the same language, we're going to get on a load better, aren't we?
No, yeah, it's much easier when everyone speaks the same language, and English is a world language as well. So not only would we be offering lessons to help people integrate within their communities, but we'd also be offering them a world language. They can visit other countries and be able to speak the language that they might not have had, and we're going to give them that to us. That also will reduce our costs.
That is a very,
because in NHS,
very positive, James. Very positive, upbeat note to finish on, and I thank you. Well, I have to say, I'm amazed to see the extent to which our national debate has changed. There has been an absolutely radical shift in the centre of gravity. And for this to come today from a committee chaired, of all people, by Chuka Ramuna is truly remarkable. This man attacked me personally and anybody that dared even talk about immigration numbers, about cultural difficulties, and about the language question. He attacked us again and again and again, and today he's quite happy to stand behind this report. Either he's guilty of hypocrisy, or he's had a complete political sea change. I think either way, Chuka, you owe me an apology for abusing me. You are now talking about this in far more right-wing terms than I would ever dare. An apology would be very, very welcome. Thank you. Well, next, we're going to talk, after the news, about that giant political figure, Tony Blair. He's going to put 10 million quid of his own money into a new organisation. He's going to provide thought leadership. How about that? Do you know what do you know what that means? I'm not sure. I think what it really means is he wants to stop Brexit from happening. He clearly thinks he's a big, powerful figure who can change all of our minds. Does Tony Blair have really big influence? Will he change the way that you think? Or is he now actually seen as damaged goods?
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 11 o'clock, the former UKIP leader Nigel Farage has said attempts by the Prime Minister's senior aides to build a relationship with America's next president have failed. It's after Downing Street announced Theresa May will travel to the United States to meet Donald Trump next month. But friend of Mr. Trump, Nigel Farage, says senior aides sent to meet Trump's team last month have publicly dismissed the president-elect.
Nick Timothy, one of the people sent on this mission, tweeted in the last couple of months of a Trump campaign, as a Tory, I don't want any reaching out to Trump. And Fiona Hill, who went with him on this mission to try and charm Team Trump, simply said during the campaign, Donald Trump is a chump. Whatever spin Number 10 are trying to put on this tonight, frankly, we are no nearer officially having a close relationship with Trump's team than we were before this story broke, which I consider to be a shame.
Commuters are being warned of severe disruption if the planned London Underground strike goes ahead next week. Transport for London says there'll be a severely reduced service from Sunday night and all of Monday. Most Zone 1 stations, including Victoria, London Bridge and Euston, are likely to be closed. The former Cabinet Minister and leading Brexit campaigner Michael Gove has defended the Prime Minister's approach to leaving the EU, saying she would not be swayed by the media. Mr Gove, who's also the member of the Parliamentary Committee for exiting the EU, has praised Downing Street for running a tight ship.
One of the good things about the Prime Minister is that she is not hurried into or cajoled into taking a position simply because the media temperature is getting a little bit hotter. And I think that's absolutely right.
A teenage boy has been stabbed in central London. Police were called to Brook Street just by Chancery Road tube station just after 6 this evening. In America, 4 people have been charged with hate crimes and kidnapping a person with special needs and streaming a vicious attack online. The 4 black suspects are accused of beating and taunting a white man via Facebook. LBC's weather: rain in northern parts into the evening, dry elsewhere with some frost, a low of -2 degrees. Tomorrow, rain spreading to most areas, a high of 11 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Zora Suleiman.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nigel Farage.
So Tony Blair is going to close down his business interests, and he's taken £10 million from the money that he's made, and he's put it straight in to a new campaigning organisation, and the objective of it's perfectly clear. He's going to provide thought leadership. Do you know what that means? No, nor do I. What it actually means is he's not going to go back into frontline politics in the sense that he's going to stand for election. He said that he's made it abundantly clear that that is not possible. But what he does want to do is he wants to oppose the new populism. Now, populism, remember, is anything that is not supported by the likes of Blair or Hillary Clinton or Jean-Claude Juncker. He says that those of us on the Brexit side of the argument and the Trump side of the argument have an essentially closed-minded approach to globalisation, by which he means that we don't support the uncontrolled free movement of people. And he makes it absolutely clear that it is the European issue that is absolutely at the centre of all that he wants to do. Now, Tony Blair's not the only person out there campaigning to effectively get this referendum run again. There are other wonderful figures, such as Bob Geldof, former Minister Alan Milburn, Richard Branson. There are people out there that want to try and delay Brexit or reverse Brexit. There are even some people taking, court cases. But clearly, Blair saying he's now going to throw himself into this basically full-time is a big moment. And whatever people think of Blair, like him or loathe him, this is the man who won 3 general elections, who absolutely dominated British politics for a long period of time, clearly very able, a man who's been enormously successful politically, since then financially. But does he have, my question is, does he have the status, does he have the respect in 2017 for this 10 million quid that he's putting in and for him to be back on the airwaves? Is that going to shift public opinion? Do you trust Tony Blair, or is he now damaged goods? I'm very keen to hear your view on this. I'd like you to call me, please, on 0345 6060 973, to text to 84850, to tweet at LBC, and you can follow all of this on lbc.co.uk. Do you trust Tony Blair? Will he shift your opinion, or is he damaged, perhaps even soiled goods? And I'm going to ask Gerald in St John's Wood to open the batting.
Nigel, thank you very much indeed. What an honour to speak to you. And can I just do a little bit of a curveball and be a little bit sycophantic? I hope you don't mind.
No. We haven't got time for all that.
When they write the history books, I think you'll go down in the history books alongside Churchill and Maggie Thatcher. I really, really do. Well, you've changed this country for the better.
Gerald,
you've been proven right.
That's charming of you, but Tony Blair's a big significant political figure of modern times, isn't he?
Yeah, but he's been an absolute disaster. Bring it on, Tony Blair, because quite honestly, any time I remember Brexit, I was out there campaigning for Leave as well. And any time a big hitter came in, from Barack Obama to Mark Carney to James Diamond from JP Morgan, and a lot of them, the IMF, the whole lot. The more they've said about the problems of Brexit, the more people stuck their fingers up and said, we're not listening to you. And I think Tony Blair has the same bad feeling that people have to him as the rest. They will not listen. It'll be counterproductive, and in fact, it'll help us a lot on the Brexit side.
But you see, what Blair would say, or will say, you're bound to hear, is that actually what happened when the governor of the Bank of England and Barack Obama and all these people appeared, actually what happened was nothing other than just a short-term protest. And Blair thinks we will all return to our senses and go back to what he calls the centre ground. Was it, Gerald, just a short-term protest that led to Brexit, or is it a fundamental change of opinion?
You know that. You know it. You've been up and down the country, you've been around the world. I don't like using the word populism. It's an awful word. And I think that there's a paradigm of shift. I saw it years ago, and so did you, that people are sick to death of the liberal elite. They see the liberal elite working for themselves on a gravy train, and that's Europe that you've been spouting about for years, and people are sick to death of it. They want a country where the politicians speak for them, where global issues are discounted, where politicians actually look at their local constituency for issues to be resolved, rather than development aid and all the other things that stick in people's throats. And Tony Blair can go on and on about it, think it's some sort of, sort of like a little mental breakdown with, 17-odd million of us have had. And then we're all going to come back and apologise. It ain't going to happen.
No.
You know that.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think actually, from what I can see travelling around, the 17.4 million people who voted Brexit are now more determined to see it happen than they were on June the 23rd. And what's really...
more than that, Nigel,
yeah.
If there was a recount today, if there was, God forbid, another referendum, I mean, please God, it never happens, and it would be terrible. But if there was another referendum, there'll be more people voting out.
I couldn't agree more. The number of people I've met who've said, well, Nigel, I voted Remain because I've got a big mortgage, and that lovely Mr. Osborne told us that the price of our house would collapse. And they can see, actually, house prices rose across the United Kingdom by 4.5% last year. So I think many of these bogus arguments are completely been written off. But it's fascinating, isn't it, that Tony Blair has the self-confidence to believe that he can get back into full-time campaigning, and that it is going to make
Nigel,
a
can
difference.
I say one more thing?
Go
Can
on.
I be slightly naughty with you? You might want to cut me off.
Oh, well, I may well, but go on, give us a try.
You are one of the most valuable people to this country, and long may you be around. Could you please stop smoking? You're too valuable. We can't lose you.
Oh, good. Well, we'll do a smoking phone-in on another evening. I think the doctors over-exaggerate all this. No, I don't really. Gerald, thank you very much indeed. I wonder what Beverly in Beaconsfield makes of this. Is Mr. Blair going to change your mind, Beverly?
I think a few weeks ago, when Tony Blair said that there's a lot of people who feel politically homeless, I think he had quite a good point there.
Yeah.
But I think the main people who feel politically homeless are the 4 million who voted for UKIP, because we don't have anyone in Westminster to represent us.
Well, that, Beverly, is true, although technically there is a Member of Parliament who's got a UKIP badge, isn't there?
Yeah, I know that, but
only one. Beverly, I do get that. However, I think what UKIP voters have had a tremendous compensation over the course of the last year, in that we know that it was the threat of us growing in the elections in 13 and in the run-up to the European elections in 14 that forced Cameron to promise that referendum. So without us, there would have been no referendum. Without us and our foot soldiers, we couldn't have won that referendum. So, I don't think, actually, it's a time when UKIPers are feeling depressed. I think generally UKIPers are very happy with what happened in 2016, but I think very anxious for what is going to happen in 2017 and beyond. And it's interesting, the Economist magazine front page cover went online just before we went on air, before 10 o'clock. And it's a picture of the Prime Minister, and the title is Theresa Maybe. the most indecisive Prime Minister we've had in modern times. And it is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I remember within a couple of weeks of her becoming PM, she questioned the Hinkley Point deal, the nuclear deal, and the very high strike price with the Chinese. I thought, wow, this is brilliant. You know, she's doing the right thing, and then that deal went ahead without anything being changed. You know, maybe she would have done something, but she chose not to. And I think when it comes to carrying out Brexit, well, none of us know where she's really going with this, including the Queen, who she didn't tell what her intentions were. So, but Beverly, you know, you started off by saying that Mr. Blair does make good points, and I would say to people out there who loathe Blair, don't think this man isn't capable, you know, of going on a TV screen or a radio station and making some good arguments, because he still certainly is. Beverly, thank you very much indeed for your call. If you want to tell us what you think of Tony Blair, can he influence things or not, do call on 0345 6060 973, and your texts and tweets are coming in. Andrew from Beckenham says, Nigel, Blair has no integrity and is a barefaced liar and should crawl back under his stone. Well, I think we know where Andrew stands on this. Another one from Ricky. Nigel, can we really trust a man who, at the most critical point in recent history, allegedly lied to the British people and sent us into an unjust and illegal war? I know, Ricky, a lot of people think that, but I'm looking for some people who want to say some nice things about a man who won 3 elections and was, for the first few years, a very successful, at least on the face of it, Prime Minister. So there's another one coming in. I wish that this man would keep his nose out and his mouth shut. No, right, OK. I'm not getting any positive texts or tweets about Tony Blair, but I want to hear from people who think that this man actually is trustworthy and that he can, using his oratorical skills, and they are beyond doubt. You know, I sat in the European Parliament in 2006 when he, for 6 months, was the President of the European Union, and believe you me, I think he was the best speaker of any national leader that I've seen in 17 years in that Parliament. I might not have agreed with him, but his ability to make an argument, his ability to change people's emotions was, at least then, a very remarkable thing. I'm going to ask Annie, who is in Carnforth in Lancashire, what she thinks of Mr. Blair going on from here.
Well, I'm a Labour Party member and I've voted Labour all my life.
Yeah.
And I don't think Blair's the right person at all to be to be getting involved in the Labour Party these days. You know, people don't like him in the population generally. Most of the Labour Party members, including myself, don't like what he stood for or what he did, the way he took the Labour Party. So I don't think he's the right person at all. I think that he's right that populism has to be challenged, not over Brexit. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn has been quite firm and said that, you know, he is in favour of Brexit, that they will, you know, the Labour Party accept that that's the democratic will of the people of this country, that they want Brexit, and that's fair enough. So I don't think Tony Blair sort of trying to somehow try and persuade people that we should have a second referendum. I think that would be absolutely ludicrous and not good for the Labour Party. And I don't think most of the Labour Party members would be in favour of Tony Blair getting involved again. But I do think that some of UKIP's policies need challenging by Labour, and I don't think a lot of people know much about UKIP's policies except your attitude towards immigration, which you go on at great lengths quite frequently.
Well, when it's the most important issue of the day and it affects absolutely everything, it's perhaps not, and when it's out of control as it is, perhaps it's not surprising that UKIP do talk about it the amount they do.
But there's lots of other very important things. I mean, like, for example, yours and Paul Nuttall's attitude towards the NHS.
Oh, whoa, Annie, hang on a second. We're talking about Tony Blair. Let's just be very, very clear, shall we? The man that privatised a large chunk of the National Health Service was one Labour Prime Minister called Tony Blair. He did it, not the Conservatives. Tony Blair did it. And for Labour to try and accuse UKIP on this issue, frankly, I think they're batting on a very weak wicket. Annie, we could continue this forever, but thank you for your, as a lifelong Labour member, your view is that Tony Blair is not going to shift this debate and will not even take committed Labour Party members like you with him on his new journey. This is Nigel Farage on LBC, where the time is now 11:16.
This is LBC. LBC at the weekend starts with Andrew Castle from 7.
Do you think I want to be at this hospital? Royal Surrey is not in the centre of town. I don't believe that people are parking there to go and then do their shopping. They're there because their relatives are ill. I speak to somebody at A&E on the front desk. These are angels in there. They've got to pay. I just don't think it's right.
Andrew Castle, Saturday and Sunday mornings from 7 on LBC.
Welcome to London's exquisite Indian dining experience, Marla Restaurant. The finest North Indian cuisine in the most charming setting. Find us in the heart of one of London's divine hidden gems, St Catherine's Dock. Marla Restaurant. Visit us in St Catherine's Dock or go to marlarestaurant.co.uk.
Marla. Discover a jewel in London's secret paradise.
At Oak Furnitureland, everyone knows our furniture is 100% real hardwood. And it's also 50% off. But most importantly, it's 100% real hardwood.
Yes, but don't forget it's also 50% off. At Oak Furnitureland, quality and price are both important. So make sure you don't miss our New Year, New Savings, where everything's 100% real hardwood with up to 50% off. Don't miss out. New Year, New Savings must end this Sunday. Visit oakfurnitureland.co.uk to find your nearest store.
Cosy nights in with the curtains drawn. Mugs of cocoa to keep us warm. Because really, after all is said and done, all you need is a special someone. And when it comes to finding something new, you can start the conversation at Hello You. Sign up and browse profiles for free at helloyoudating.com and start the conversation today.
Lanyap. It's a Cajun word. When you buy 6 apples, then discover they've given you 7. Lanyap. Crayon Financial. Like all good mortgage brokers, search the market for the most competitive mortgage and remortgage deals. But if you buy through us, we'll write your will for free. Lanyap. For expert advice, call Crayon Financial Services on 0208 572 4455. That's 0208 572 4455. Your home may be repossessed if you don't keep up with your repayments. Visit crayonfs.com.
Before I did my tax return, I was so wound up, I forgot all about the smaller things in life. But now it's done. I'm so relaxed, I can spend hours just staring at a cornflake.
You too can find inner peace. Do your tax return online by the 31st of January and avoid a £100 penalty. Go to gov.uk/self-assessment and don't forget to pay what you owe.
In a city where enemies of the internet try to ruin people's surfing, streaming, and downloading, they needed a hero. They needed Lego Batman.
No, the new Sky Broadband Tech Team.
What? I have my own tech team. Actually, it's just Alfred.
We're specially trained to resolve most broadband problems online or on the phone.
Oh yeah, well, I'm specially trained in everything.
We'll even visit your home if needed.
I'll drop in even when not needed.
Do you always have the last word?
Obviously, I'm Batman.
Introducing the new Sky Broadband Tech Team. Their dedicated experts ensure you get the best customer service in town. Sky, believe in better.
Ofcom Quality of Customer Service Report 2016 excludes Highlands and Islands. Further terms apply.
Last word.
Nigel Farage on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Tony Blair stopped making lots of money. He's thrown himself into the Blair Institute. He's even put £10 million of his own money into it, and he is going to be back campaigning, giving us what he calls thought leadership, but basically tackling populism. What is populism? Well, it's anyone that votes in a way different to what he wants. He'd like really to call them all racists and bigots, but he knows that's counterproductive. So they've come up with this new word, populism. But the question is, and I've read out tweets and texts from people who hate Blair, and the legacy of the Iraq War for many people, and the circumstances under which we were told and why we were going. A lot of people can never forgive him for that. But the argument I've been making is, he's clearly capable, but do we trust him? Can he still influence us, or is he now just damaged goods? That's the question that we're trying to tease out. And next we're going to go to Marcus on Henley and Thames and ask him that very question. Is Blair damaged goods, or could he still influence people?
I believe he can still influence people.
Okay.
I mean, the reason I'm saying I'm going to go to his NHS as well. I remember in 1992, a dear one I loved so much. I remember Victorian Star hospitals. After the Blair government, our hospitals improved dramatically, and I lost my mum last month. And our NHS is something that's awesome, and it's a credit to our country. And I do hold Blair responsible for that, and I think he did a wonderful job, and I have no issues with that. So I'm going to say,
okay. So you think you think Blair did a good job with the NHS, but there are some problems. Yeah. But there are some problems, Marcus, with Blair's reputation. I've talked about Iraq, but there's one other problem that I think makes Tony Blair rather weak to come back and campaign primarily on the European question, and it's this. He wanted us to join the Euro. He campaigned for us to join the Euro. If he'd done that, we would have made the biggest economic mistake of modern times and found ourselves, like Greece, with foreign bureaucrats coming in and telling us what we can and can't do. Marcus, surely that was an horrendously bad decision.
I'm going to stop you there. We actually agree on something here.
Right.
Absolutely, with the Euro, fine. But with Blair's policy on the you asked me to phone in.
Yeah.
Something positive about Blair.
Yeah.
I'm going to say on the NHS through the 90s, we saw a massive growth. We saw a massive surge in our NHS. I think it's superb. My mum had cancer since 2004, and she was successfully kept alive by our wonderful NHS, and we must never take our eyes off how brilliant it is.
Well, Blair, Blair did I mean, more than double the spending that went into the National Health Service. He also privatised a large chunk of the National Health Service. Now, again, these are contentious issues, but from what you've seen through your mother, you are happy with the NHS that Blair left us and gifted, in your view, to Cameron. And fine, and fine, and I understand that. That's your point of view. You believe it very passionately. But what I'm saying is this, that this Blair Institute is really, let's be honest, it's all about the European Union. That's why people like Alan Milburn are around. That's why they're in touch with Richard Branson. That's why they're all mates with Bob Geldof. They effectively want to delay Brexit, and they want an opportunity in a second referendum to overturn Brexit. And I'm just saying, Marcus, that if it was a health institute that he'd set up, then perhaps there'd be legions of people like you out there who'd say he did a great job with the NHS, and what he's going to say and do here is powerful. I think that for him to try and persuade us that we've made the wrong decision about the European Union when he supported us joining the Euro, I think leaves him in a weak position. That's the point I'm making, Marcus.
Well, I'm going to say this, yes. As far as Blair's concerned, it has been. Now, he should let sleeping dogs lie. It's a Brexit world we live in now. I believe that, and I was a Remainer. By the way, I believe now we've got to go down this path. We will go down this path, and we've got to get on with it. But we must not forget he had a good legacy on our NHS.
No, and Marcus, actually,
remind people of that.
And Marcus, actually, there'd be many that would say that in Northern Ireland, what he did was actually to bring to an end something horrendous that had gone on for over 30 years and in which thousands of people have been killed.
I think that was John Major as well.
Well, no. Well, yes, of course. But Major did start the process. But actually, the Good Friday Agreement and all of those things, there are a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people who would say that actually Blair was a very transformative Prime Minister.
I would agree as well. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But also, I'd just like to say, let's move on. And our country is it's a wonderful country. And my mother, had a lovely, lovely life. And I just like to say that.
Good, Marcus, that's wonderful. Thank you. And you were a Remainer who accepts the result and says we should move on. You are, Marcus, a true Democrat and a gentleman. And I thank you very much indeed for your call. Kevin in Croydon. Now, come on, Kevin, tell me, is Tony Blair going to change your mind?
Well, he'd struggle, Nigel, because, I mean, what's happened to political language? What's happened to left, right and centre when the centre that he wants to take us all back to, apparently, we recognise as being a place of permanent war, unpayable debt, endless lies to justify throwing our country into the arms of these bankers. It's just like... there's nothing centre about that. He was a revolutionary. These people are revolutionaries. They want to take over the world. You're a counter-revolutionary, Nigel. You know, that is world revolution.
It's very interesting, Kevin. It's very interesting, isn't it, that those who call themselves centre or call themselves sort of soft centre left, whether it's Blair or Hillary Clinton, indeed, and actually, in terms of foreign policy, they've been the neocons, haven't they? They were the ones screaming to get rid of Gaddafi in Libya in 2011. Those of us that warned from the sidelines were told, no, we must intervene. And what have we done to Libya? We've made it so much worse, haven't we, than it was before?
Monstrous, Nigel. What we've done in Libya, Syria, Iraq is monstrous. It's beyond appalling. I feel terribly ashamed, and I feel that we, the Western leadership, people like the Brexit, yourself and Trump are like a healthy reaction to this, a human reaction to it against our own leadership, where the fault really lies, and the problem really is that it's all really controlled by remote money. It's the banking system that seems to own the entire political system.
Well, I think the relationship, Kevin, the relationship between big banks, big business, and big politics, they've almost become one and the same thing. That's been my view for some time.
Keep fighting against it, Nigel, because we do appreciate it, I'll tell you.
Well,
you know?
Kevin, that's very sweet of you. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Another person not going to be influenced by Blair. Howard in Hastings, what do you think of Mr. Blair?
Oh, hello, Nigel. It's a pleasure to speak to you, but I'm rather nervous speaking to you because I've been following politics over the last 7 months quite thoroughly, and featured in quite a lot of that. It's a bit nerve-wracking, it's daunting.
No, get on with it. Far away. Tell me what you think, Howard.
Well, as one of the genuinely politically homeless in this country, yes, I think Blair is highly capable, and that's exactly what worries me. And I think you used the words yourself just after the adverts when you said he wants to introduce thought leadership. If those two words, they sound exactly like they've been conjoined together in some sort of think tank somewhere. And I think Tony Blair is one of those persons who is jacked right into globalisation central, and therefore probably will know exactly what to say and how to do it. And there's a group, there's a lot of influence there, an awful lot of influence, wherever those ideas are being expressed, and we're trying to pull away from that now, as Kevin was brilliantly just saying. With the ascendancy of Trump in the States and the movement for reclaiming national sovereignty in this country and possibly in other countries in Europe as well. I wish the likes of Blair could just go away.
He's not going to do that, Howard. He's just forked out 10 million quid. So I think we're going to be hearing a fair bit from him. But even the term thought leadership is sort of rather Orwellian kind of term, isn't it?
Very much so, yeah.
There is... Well, I think, in a sense, Howard, I think you're right to say that he's capable, and that's what worries you. He is capable. All you listeners who might think he's an idiot because you don't like him, you may not like him. Believe me, he's not an idiot. He's a very, very capable man. But I think, Howard, if I were you, I wouldn't be too worried, because I think he's trying to change the country's mind on the question of Europe. I don't think they're for changing, and I think every time he makes a speech, we will say, Mr. Blair, isn't it right you wanted us to join the euro? I think on this subject, more than any other, he is completely damaged goods. So, Howard, in Hastings, enjoy the seaside, and don't worry. I don't think Mr. Blair has got any influence. This is Nigel Farage here on LBC. It is 11:30. With the latest news headlines, it's Zora Suleiman.
The Prime Minister will travel to the United States to meet Donald Trump next month. Senior aides to Theresa May flew out to meet the President-elect's team in December. Tube passengers have been warned to prepare for a severely reduced service as talks aimed at stopping a 24-hour London Underground strike ended without agreement again. The walkout starts on Sunday night and will continue through to Monday. And Nigel Farage has spoken of his shock at the major U-turn by Labour MP Chuka Umunna after Mr Umunna called for immigrants to learn English before coming to Britain or take compulsory language classes when they arrive. Mr Farage says he was heavily criticised by Mr Umunna when he made a comment a few years ago that some people in the UK didn't speak English.
Either he's guilty of hypocrisy or he's had a complete political sea change. I think either way, Chuka, you owe me an apology for abusing me. You are now talking about this in far more right-wing terms than I would ever dare. An apology would be very, very welcome.
And LBC's weather: rain in northern parts into the evening, dry elsewhere with some frost, a low of -2 degrees.
This is LBC.
This goes out to Gavin Owen, founder of SpaChem, chemicals for spas and pools. Gav's not just dipped his toe into starting a business, by GoDaddy he's dived right in. At first he was a small fish in an even smaller pond, but GoDaddy's email marketing tool really opened the floodgates. Now things are going swimmingly. He's my man, the merman. This spot's for you, G.
Go SpaChem, GoDaddy. Taking your business online.
When you talk to Barnes Rove, they really want to get to know your business and understand what makes it tick. You'll meet your contact partner regularly. What's more, they'll make sure you're not missing out on clever tax-saving solutions and that you only pay the tax you need to. Now that's got to be a conversation worth having. No wonder many businesses of Greater London love talking to Barnes Rove. Clever accountants for business. Visit barnesrove.com/radio.
Westway. It's here, the Westway Nissan January sale. Don't let on, but you can save up to 30% off new car prices on a range of over 1,000 nearly new and used Nissans. Plus, there's up to £1,000 towards your deposit and up to 2 years free servicing with representative 9.9% APR when you buy through Nissan Finance, subject to status. Save up to 30% at the Westway Nissan January sale. Way more than just a sale. To find your nearest Westway, Google Westway Nissan today.
From working 9 to 5 to working on your tan. Experience the best of Asia, Australia and New Zealand with Singapore Airlines. With great fares to Thailand, the Philippines, Australia and more, there's no better time to plan your next getaway. Book now at singaporeair.com. Singapore Airlines, a great way to fly.
It's amazing what you have at your fingertips. Emails, photos, banking. Yep, your smart devices keep getting smarter. But so do all those cyber criminals. They keep coming up with new ways to get at the personal things on your phone, tablet and computer. To keep them secure, always download the latest software and app updates. They contain important security upgrades which help protect your device from nasty viruses and hackers. Be cyber aware. Visit cyberaware.gov.uk.
This is LBC with Nigel Farage. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
So Tony Blair is going to put £10 million of his own money into a new Blair Institute so that he can go out and campaign against people, not just people like me, but against over half the country who voted for Brexit. He thinks we are silly. He thinks we are populist. He thinks we are essentially closed-minded people. And he is going to change our mind. Well, there's no doubt he's a capable man. There's no question about him winning 3 elections and being, at times, an absolutely brilliant orator. The question is, do you trust him? Does he now have the ability to influence your opinion with what he says, or is he damaged goods? I want to hear from people who are still Blairites. I want to hear from people who think there's no chance of him influencing them at all. And I'm going to find out what Andrew in Brighton thinks next.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi, I'm not a Blairite at all. I never claim to be a Blairite. But however, Tony Blair is an individual who historically has a lot of clout because of his previous standing as Prime Minister, and is really a face historically for the centre ground. This last year, I've found myself to be totally depressed by the state of the political rhetoric in the nation, largely down to individuals such as yourself, for creating divisions in society. I feel extremely nervous talking to people now, and I feel this absolute mistrust of people coming from other countries because of lies and hysteria that you've whipped up.
Do you think, Andrew, it's possible that the divisions have been caused by wholly irresponsible open-door immigration, and that actually, prior to that, and prior to Mr. Blair opening up the door, we had the best race relations and inter-community relations of any country in Europe?
No, I actually find that it's very, in terms of the whole overall kind of system of politics, it's very, very easy for you to criticise problems with our public services by blaming it on the immigrants, just using that as a scapegoat. And I find you've created a terrifying culture in this place, and I find it absolutely abhorrent. You've behaved in such a way.
Well, Andrew, come on.
At least with Tony Blair. No.
Numbers matter, Andrew, don't they? Numbers matter. I mean, I keep trying to make the argument that we ran a policy from 1950 until the year 2000 of a net 30,000 people a year coming to Britain. It is now over 1/3 Isn't that what the problem is?
I absolutely do not think that is a problem at all. I think you're making absolutely outrageous assumptions by then creating this causality to it being related to immigration.
Well, Andrew, I'm not making assumptions. I'm giving you facts. I'm telling you we've gone from 30,000 a year to 1/3 a year. We couldn't plan for it, and it's given us a massive problem with healthcare provision, with school provision, and with people getting on the housing. I'm not trying to stir up division, but I am trying to tell the truth.
I find it extraordinary that you can't admit that you're not trying to stir up division here. You talk about facts. What about this 350 million apparently is coming back into our NHS? That seems to have completely disappeared from the conversation.
Well,
now.
that was a Boris and Gove pledge, and it should have been about 200 million a week, and at that it would have been entirely factually correct. However, I think we could argue, Andrew, that there'd been just the odd little porky on the other side, such as this great man, Mr. Blair, who's trying to persuade us that open borders are a good thing, who told us that Saddam Hussein could obliterate us within 45 minutes, and that's why we had to go to war. So, you can look at all sides of political arguments, you can criticise what everybody says, but my question, Andrew, I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think Blair could influence public opinion on the question of our referendum result?
I think Blair could. He's got a massive challenge with the seagull around his neck that is Iraq, because now that ball and chain has been tied to him as a result of a history. Again, I think of individuals such as yourself tarring him with that brush. I'm not sure. When he first left office, these kind of things...
Andrew, is there anything I could do that's right? I mean, I'm not tarring him with the brush of Iraq. I'm merely pointing out what the Chilcot report, which incidentally took more time than the Second World War lasted to produce, but what the Chilcot report pointed out. So we can point fingers of blame at figures that Boris and Gove used, and we can point huge fingers of blame at Tony Blair. The real question, Andrew, is this country voted in a big national referendum this year, and it made an historic decision for us to change direction.
You whipped up.
But you know what the biggest lie was, Andrew? It was told to my mum and dad. They were told it was a common market, there would be no political integration, and don't worry your little heads. The truth is, the whole thing has been a damn lie for nearly half a century. It's been a disgrace. It's been a closed shop of big businesses and politicians who want to, frankly, tread down the opinions of ordinary people. And when we win, they pop back up, don't they? Mr. Blair pops back up, chucks 10 million quid in, and calls all the rest of us populists and small-minded. Andrew, normally, I'm able to persuade people in debate that I hold a reasonable, logical point of view, that it's based on facts and it's based on numbers. I'm afraid with you tonight I have failed, but I have no intention of falling out with you, and I hope we speak again on another issue at some point in the not-too-distant future. Oh, well, you can't win them all, I suppose. Let's speak to George in Walthamstow. George, is Mr. Blair going to change your mind?
No, he won't change my mind. He will change some people's minds. I mean, even I could change people's minds if I had 10 million quid to throw.
Very good.
Basically, I think it's a wrong call on his part. I think his narcissism has overtaken his political savvy, and I think he's going to be preaching to the converted, but ultimately it'll backfire because he's a toxic brand. He's soiled goods, and I think bring it on. Bring it on, because this is welcome. I mean, to us Brexiters, of course. I think it's bloody good. So I think it's really good news. So, great, wonderful. The other thing I'd like to say about Tony Blair,
yep.
No disrespect to the previous caller who had a relative who died in hospital, but felt that the hospitals were good. Those hospitals were built with PFIs, privatised hospitals.
Yes.
But many hospitals can't balance their books these days, and part of it is because they can't repay those loans. And I think there's all of this stuff that Tony Blair is responsible for that will come out and bite him on his bum.
The PFIs, George, and I didn't get into a pitch battle on the NHS with that caller because tonight's show is not about the NHS and Blair's legacy specifically, but you are quite right. These clever, so-called clever PFI deals that have left many hospitals with absolutely massive, crippling repayments. And it's amazing, isn't it, that it was a Labour Prime Minister that made so many people with large amounts of private money so very, very rich. Your comments earlier about Blair's narcissism, as you see it, about the toxicity of his brand, and the fact that actually the more he does, the more it'll backfire. George in Walthamstow, I think you are completely on the money. Thank you. I'm going to go next to Jiggs in Bexley. Jiggs, is Blair going to sweep the country and make people like me change my minds?
Well, no, hi. Well, first of all, good evening. It's a good discussion, and thanks for taking my call. I appreciate that.
Not at all.
Well, no, he's definitely not going to change your view, because your views are quite fixed, Mr. Farage. You know exactly where your views are. But let me just correct you on a couple of points. First of all, PFI actually was started by Margaret Thatcher government. It was started by Conservatives. It wasn't actually by Tony Blair. And secondly, Tony Blair had actually won 2 general elections.
Yes.
And I don't think in yourself, in your own position, or with UKIP and so on, have won anything. You know,
Jiggs. Hang on. I did. When I talked about Blair, I credited him with winning 3 general elections, and I would ask you to credit me with being the first party political leader since 1906 to win a national election that wasn't Labour or Tory when I led UKIP to victory in the 2014 European elections.
No, well, I don't agree with that. You did not lead UKIP. You led UKIP, but UKIP themselves did not win the vote. You know, you were
Jiggs. If you look at the figures, mate.
There was a mixed Labour, Conservatives, UKIP. It was a mixed individual views. UKIP was not holding the flag to say the Brexit is behind us. Come on, Mr. Farage. You have to be, reasonable in that as well. You had your views. Some of your views clashed with other Brexit views, so to speak.
Sure. Listen, Jiggs, of course, there were within the Brexit camp some different shades of opinion on issues, just as there were within the Remain camp. But what was absolutely clear is that if we voted for Brexit, we voted not just to leave the European Union, but we also voted to leave the so-called single market. And I think what Mr. Blair, above all, wants to do is to try and change our minds on that bit and keep us on the single market. And my question, and look, you've made the points about Blair being a big winner in elections, and I agree with that completely. My question to you, Jiggs, is do you think, with 10 million quid behind him, and given his oratorical skills, which I've acknowledged in this programme, do you think Tony Blair can change people's minds?
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you why. Because I think what Tony Blair did, and in fact, last time I actually voted Cameron, because I think Cameron was very balanced person as well. I mean, I don't normally vote Conservatives, but he was a good Conservative as far as I was concerned. But the reason why I think Blair was actually a good Prime Minister, because he tried to balance between social responsibilities and economic responsibilities. He tried that third way of saying, look, you can be successful and you can still have social responsibilities and so on. And going back on the war and so on, it was not Blair's intelligence, it was the government's intelligence. You should not, go on about this, because you know yourself as a senior politician that he took advice from, even the USA and so on. You have to be honest. And the thing is, your whole...
Well, listen, George Bush, Jigs.
You're not an honest person.
Oh, well, you can think... Listen, that's fine if you want to think that, but frankly, don't take my word for what Blair did over Iraq. Take the Chilcot report on it, and the former Prime Minister did come out badly. I don't... For 1 minute... I haven't pretended to anybody that I think Blair's an idiot, have I, tonight? I've said to everybody, this is a capable man, this is a guy who can be incredibly charming on a personal level, and frankly, at his best, a fantastic orator. I just think, there are things that history will credit Blair with, some good and some bad. I suspect that Iraq actually is what will shade much of the historical opinion about him. But I think to come back and to try and change our minds on a fundamental issue like membership of the single market and the European Union, when he was the cheerleader for joining the euro, which would have been the biggest economic mistake in modern times, mean on this issue, if nothing else, he is enormously damaged goods. This is Nigel Farage on LBC, and the time is now 11:47.
LBC. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
To Israel, a military court has convicted a soldier there of manslaughter for killing an incapacitated Palestinian attacker in a case that has divided the nation.
As an ex-Israeli army officer, I do have sympathy for the soldier, and I was in a similar situation myself when I was serving in Gaza, and I unfortunately had to shoot somebody. In the British Army, the majority of soldiers, all the soldiers that go in there, are people who have decided that they want to become soldiers and they want to go in the army. These are people who are as brothers, sisters. It's a part of the institution that everybody goes into and everybody is part of.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
Right, your car's all ready. Great. Who's that sticking out of the engine?
Oh, yes, Simon. He's just giving it a thorough last check. He does get stuck in.
Yeah.
Right, grab a leg.
Oh, okay.
Come on, Simon.
We know every Nissan back to front. So for total peace of mind, visit Nissan's used car event from the 27th of December to the 22nd of January. Get a deposit contribution of £500 or even £1,000 on X-Trail, plus 2 years servicing on selected nearly new vehicles bought with Nissan Finance. 9.9% APR representative, subject to status and over 18s. Participating dealers. T's and C's apply. See nissanusedcars.co.uk. Google Nissan Cared For to find your nearest dealer.
At Oak Furnitureland, everyone knows our furniture is 100% real hardwood.
And it's also 50% off.
But most importantly, it's 100% real hardwood.
Yes, but don't forget it's also 50% off.
At Oak Furnitureland, quality and price are both important. So make sure you don't miss our New Year, New Savings, where everything's 100% real hardwood with up to 50% off. Don't miss out. New Year, New Savings must end this Sunday. Visit oakfurnitureland.co.uk to find your nearest store.
I want my wife to be protected. We were just talking about a family holiday and bam! Before I knew it, she's booked it all. The flights, rental car, hotel, and even a helicopter ride, which I've always wanted. She finds these fantastic deals online, but the last thing we need is our bank details falling into the wrong hands.
Join 400 million users of our technology and protect your finances with Kaspersky Internet Security. Awarded Which Best Buy for PC 3 years in a row. Learn more at kaspersky.co.uk.
Divorce. It threatens the things you've worked hard for in more ways than you can imagine. Your home, savings, pension, and most of all, your relationship with your children. Don't let divorce cost you any more than it has to. Cordell & Cordell is dedicated to helping men in matters relating to divorce. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordellcordell.co.uk. Office in central London. A partner men can count on.
It's amazing what you have at your fingertips. Emails, photos, banking. Yep, your smart devices keep getting smarter. But so do all those cyber criminals. They keep coming up with new ways to get at the personal things on your phone, tablet and computer. To keep them secure, always download the latest software and app updates. They contain important security upgrades which help protect your device from nasty viruses and hackers. Be cyber aware. Visit cyberaware.gov.uk.
Don't miss the Nissan used car event. On until the 22nd of January at all 14 Glyn Hopkin dealerships. Search Glyn Hopkin Nissan.
Nigel Farage on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Tony Blair, political giant, wins 3 general elections, nearly becomes the president of Europe, maybe even the world, who knows? And now he's put £10 million into a campaign, the Blair Institute. He wants to make us change our minds on the referendum we had on June the 23rd last year. The question is, do we trust him? Does he still have influence? Or is he damaged goods? Craig in Preston, what do you think?
Hi, Nigel. Yes, good evening to you. Basically, I believe that he is essentially a fantastic performer and actor, which is why he's been so successful in the past. It's his ability to connect with people because of the way he puts things across.
Yep.
And very much in the same vein as, let's say, for example, Barack Obama. So I think it becomes more a question of delivery and style over actual substance. And I think that's pretty much, you could argue that's the case for modern day politics. I don't know if you remember, Nigel, when he came out after the Chilcot inquiry.
Yes.
And he did about, I think, an hour and a half speech. And, you know, whether you believe the guy or not, you have to be absolutely in awe of the way he curates and delivers his lines. That's essentially what he does.
Craig, when he did that 6-month presidency of the European Union, I listened to him. I saw him walk into a European Parliament that was hostile to Britain. This was over Iraq, actually, because the big European countries had not gone to war. He had. They saw that as division within the European Union. He walked into a chamber that was hostile to them, and 40 minutes later, they gave him a standing ovation. Craig, I agree with you. In fact, I'm proud of one thing. I think I'm the only person that Tony Blair has ever shouted at. And he literally, in public, actually did shout at me very, very loudly. So I really got under his skin, and I'm quite proud of that. But Craig, with people who are great orators, or I don't know, great singers, or I think there is a time and a moment when they catch the mood. And it's very interesting that Obama in 2008 was something of an international sensation, wasn't he? I mean, he went and spoke at the Brandenburg Gate, and 200,000 people turned up. He said, "We are a new generation, and this is our time." Utterly meaningless twaddle, and they all went berserk. and yet, Craig, Obama now, he's got the odd good one-liner, but Obama now looks a hugely diminished figure when he speaks. It's just not his moment. And I think, Craig, I completely agree with you. This man had a quite uncanny... I mean, he was the sort of quintessential late 20th century politician, Blair, wasn't he, in every way? I think, Craig, myself, that moment has gone. And I think he's making a massive mistake in terms of his own historical legacy by stopping what he's really good at now, which is making shed loads of money, and getting back into a campaign that I don't think he'll win. But Craig, I enjoyed talking to you, and you're right. A lot of people, because they don't like Blair, particularly over Iraq, forget just how able in many ways he was. Pauline in Slough. Pauline, what do you think of Mr. Blair?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to you for staying so charming and so pleasant in the face of quite a lot of nastiness.
Do you know, Pauline, compared to the nastiness I've been subjected to by many in politics over the last few years, these people tonight are charmers.
I'm sorry.
It's all right, go on.
Yes. Well, you ask about Mr. Blair.
Yep.
And I just want to say the man is deluded. And he clearly doesn't use our roads. Before Christmas, I went to Hampton Court. Hampton Court from Slough should take 50 minutes.
Yeah.
It took 2 hours solidly on the motorways.
Yeah.
I go to Wimbledon to see a friend. That's 50 minutes. It takes 2 hours. The roads are getting more and more choked. We cannot take any more people on our roads.
But Pauline, why don't you just go by helicopter? What's the matter with you?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not global elite.
Ah, oh, I didn't realise. If I'd known that, we wouldn't have taken your call. I think, I'm not sure that Tony Blair does travel everywhere by helicopter, but I'm sure his travel problems, Pauline, are a lot easier than yours. Do you know, a few years ago, I was going for a meeting in Cardiff, and I'd given about 6 hours to get there, and I was giving a speech, and it actually mattered politically. And anyway, I missed it. The M4 was like a car park all the way, yeah. and I sort of half jokingly said, well, of course, there's too many people in the country. That's why the roads. And actually, if you think about it logically, it's true, isn't it? Because, you know, we have a population that was 55 million in 1990, and it's 65 million or more now, and we just haven't built enough roads to compensate with a population growth of 10 million people. And yet, you know, you think I'd said something dreadful. Pauline, I understand what you're saying. It's odd, isn't it, that people that hold the view that you hold are now being vilified by a section of this population who do not think you're entitled to hold that opinion. Well, I jolly well do, and I wish you luck in winning the lottery this week and in getting your helicopter and getting around the country much, much, much more easily. Pauline, thank you. And the last call on this subject is David in St John's Wood. David, is Blair going to change your mind?
How are you?
I'm well.
Listen, I don't agree with you. I wouldn't vote for you, but I am a fan because you're honest and you give voice to a lot of people. And I'm a Remainer who still thinks we should leave because I'm a Democrat.
Good man. Hurrah. Absolutely good man. No, that's absolutely right. And that is actually what generations of British people would have said, isn't it? Whoever had won the election or a referendum. And that is democracy, and I agree with that. But Mr. Blair wants to reverse this.
It's a British value, not of just democracy, but of also fair play.
Yes.
And I think Blair is someone who isn't a fair player. His lies over WMD are unbelievable.
Yep.
I've read lots of the Chilcot report. It is clear he misled in his legalese kind of way. It says clearly that he wanted to have democratic regime change and that WMD was just a short-term excuse for doing so.
Along with George Bush.
Yeah. 52% of the British public believe he misled the public, so I think he will influence the political airways, but he'll do so because people will go the opposite way of Blair.
David, I thank you. We've actually, I'm afraid, sadly, run out of time, but I pick up on that point you made at the end very strongly. I have to say that I think we've had a good discussion tonight about Blair with some very fair callers all round. Do not underestimate the ability of this man. He won 3 elections. He's a great orator, but I'm afraid not only is he past his time in the sense that the notes just do not strike in the same resonant way, but on this question of the European Union, he is completely and utterly fatally damaged. Why? He wanted us to join the euro. It would have been a complete catastrophe, and he gave away £7 billion of British taxpayers' money as a rebate in return for the French giving him nothing. My view is that even if Mr. Blair put £100 million into this campaign, he would not shift British public opinion, and I think for the sake of his own historical legacy, he is making a very, very big mistake. Now, coming up next, Carwyn Jones, who is the First Minister in Wales, is about, through devolved powers, to get the ability to introduce some legislation through the Welsh Assembly that would make it a criminal offence for parents to smack their children. That would apply not just in the street or the supermarket, but at home. It would also apply to foreign tourists. It would apply to English people. Now, I would argue that smacking and child abuse are rather different, but the question is, what actually will banning smacking achieve? And is the state simply going too far and intruding way too much into our lives?
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at midnight, Theresa May is going to travel to the US next month to hold meetings with Donald Trump. It follows a series of discussions held last month between Downing Street officials and the president-elect's team in America. However, former UKIP leader and friend of Donald Trump, Nigel Farage, says the government's failed to build a relationship with America's next president.
Nick Timothy, one of the people sent on this mission, tweeted in the last couple of months of the Trump campaign, as a Tory, I don't want any reaching out to Trump. And Fiona Hill, who went with him on this mission to try and charm Team Trump, simply said during the campaign, Donald Trump is a chump. Whatever spin Number 10 are trying to put on this tonight, frankly, we are no nearer officially having a close relationship with Trump's team than we were before this story broke, which I consider to be a shame.
Commuters are being warned of severe disruption if the planned underground strike goes ahead next week. Transport for London says there'll be a severely reduced service from Sunday night and all of Monday. Most Zone 1 stations, including Victoria, London Bridge and Euston, are likely to be closed. The former Cabinet Minister and leading Brexit campaigner Michael Gove has defended the Prime Minister's approach to leaving the EU, saying she would not be swayed by the media. Mr Gove, who's also a member of the Parliamentary Committee for Exiting the EU, has praised Downing Street for running a tight ship.
One of the good things about the Prime Minister is that she is not hurried into or cajoled into taking a position simply because the media temperature is getting a little bit hotter. And I think that's absolutely right.
Tests reveal a man killed by armed officers on the M62 near Huddersfield died from gunshot wounds to the chest. Mohammed Yasser Akub was inside a car with two people on Monday. A firearm was later found inside. Well, his family have described the planned police operation as an assassination. His dad believes he was wrongly killed.
My son has never been involved in firearms. Just because you have friends and they may be associated with wrong things, the police tend to link people thinking because you're an associate.
Meanwhile, a man has been charged with firearm offences in connection with the armed police operation. The 30-year-old from Dewsbury is due in court later today. Hampshire police say they're investigating after lasers were shone at planes near Southampton Airport 4 times in the last week. Each time the beam was aimed at the cockpit. LBC's weather: rain in northern parts well into the evening, dry elsewhere with some frost, a low of -2 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Zora Suleiman.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nigel Farage.
So the First Minister in Wales is a man called Carwyn Jones, somebody I know and I did head-to-head debates with in the run-up to the referendum. Now, as you know, ever since devolution, and we were just talking about Mr Blair, weren't we? Mr Blair brought in these devolved packages. Increasingly, we see Northern Ireland and London and Scotland and Wales having the ability to make more and more of their own decisions. And in many ways, the argument goes that if you put decision-making closer to the people, that's a good thing. But one of the things that Carwyn Jones has been campaigning for, and he is the Labour First Minister, he wants the ability, through legislation, through devolved powers, to ban, in fact, to make it a criminal offence for people to smack their children. Now, this would not, if this legislation goes through in the form that he wants, mean that you couldn't smack your kids in the street, you couldn't smack your kids in the supermarket, but it would mean you actually could not smack your kids at home. It would also apply to tourists. It would also apply to, say, English people on a day trip to North Wales, South Wales, wherever it may be. Now, clearly there is a big debate about smacking. There is a big debate about what constitutes a smack. And I'm not for one moment suggesting that we return to, Tom Brown's school days where, you're sort of flogged within an inch of your life. I'm not suggesting that. I personally think that there are times with toddlers particularly where perhaps a little slap over the back of the legs might just prove to be an incentive to help bring better behaviour in the future. I would also argue that if this legislation was brought in, it would not stop genuine, horrific child abuse. In fact, it would make no difference to that whatsoever. So I personally take the view that this legislation isn't necessary, and I'm quite happy for you to tell me whether you think smacking children should be allowed or shouldn't be allowed. But broader than that, there is this argument: has now government got too much power? Is it having too big a say over our lives? So let me know if you think it's right that a law should come in Wales, and then perhaps to the rest of the UK, that smacking of all kinds should disappear. But equally, talk to me if you think the state's got too much power over our lives, over your life. So you can call us on 0345 60 60 973. You can text us at 84850. You can tweet us at LBC. You can listen to us on lbc.co.uk. And I will just I will start by asking James in Doncaster what he thinks about this potential smacking law.
Hello, Nigel.
Hello.
I personally, I'm not really strongly for or against it, but what I would say is it's utterly unenforceable. How are they going to know if a child's been smacked? I mean, unless they've been beaten within an inch of their lives and they've got marks all over them, in which case that's beating anyway. I mean, how are they going to find out? How is this enforceable in any way?
Well, perhaps what they're thinking in Cardiff is they will sort of bring back an organisation such as the Stasi in East Germany, and if a child of 8 or 9 has been smacked for something, they will immediately ring some panic number, and the police will come round and arrest their parents, and then in that case the child will get some sort of special medal. I don't know, James, is the answer. Of course, it is wholly and utterly unenforceable. Certainly in private, I agree with that. And the real question is, does legislation like this make kids safer? Does it stop genuine physical or sexual child abuse? And I'm going to argue it makes no difference at all, but I'd be keen to hear from callers who tell me, no, actually smacking is morally wrong. It's the first step down a violent route. I'm quite happy to listen to people that ring in and tell me that. I personally simply don't believe it. I think it's bad law. I think it's unenforceable, James, and I think it does, frankly, no good at all. Do you sort of buy that or not?
Oh, yeah, I'm completely with you on this one, Nigel. Not with everything, but for this one, I'm definitely with you.
Right.
I mean, it's completely unenforceable, and I mean, it's a slippery slope to, more state intervention. It's got a whiff of sort of Soviet Russia.
Yes.
Sort of communism about it.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, look, a lot of our freedoms have been taken away. I mean, what about smoking? We're not allowed to smoke in the pub. We're not allowed to smoke in a separate room in the pub. And, isn't it amazing? When that law came in, all over Europe, on the same day, many countries brought that law in. Most of them have now changed it. Most of them now. I mean, you go to Hamburg, there are big signs up, separate smoking room available, separate smoking area available. And yet in this country, we have a total ban on smoking indoors. I don't think the argument is whether smoking's good for you or bad for you. It's the state interfering. And the latest one, James, we got on that is plain packaging. So my normal brand of cigarettes was very distinctive with its colour. Now it's a black plain package. And I went in the other day and I said to the young bloke who was serving, I want a packet of X. And he couldn't find them because every single packet on the shelf looked the same. I think the state's got too much power, and we maybe even could move on later in the hour, who knows, to issues like hunting. And whether people are morally opposed to hunting, is it the state's ability to make those decisions? So, James, you and I, on this one, are completely at one, and I thank you very much indeed for your call. Next we go to Carl in Hitchin in Hertfordshire. What do you think about the smacking law, Carl?
Well, Nigel, I've got total respect for you. I honestly just admire you as a speaker, as a politician. On this one, I don't agree with you.
Okay.
With regards to spanking, I've got a 3-year-old son.
Yeah.
He's hard work, and I mean seriously hard work.
Yeah.
But I personally think I don't know, respect is more important. The child's got to respect you. And when you're spanking a child, there's no respect there. Absolutely none at all. And fear, I got fear from my father, and it wasn't by striking. It was by respecting the man and seeing what the man was like. And so I'm not with you on that one.
Isn't there, Carl, a question of degrees? We could use the term beating, and I think you and I would know what it means. You use the term spanking, and I use the term smacking.
Yeah.
Now, I would suggest to you that there are varying degrees of this.
Of course.
I mean, there are times when, and you'll know this with a 3-year-old, there are times when you physically have to restrain or change the course of a child for their own good and their own safety, aren't there?
Well, 100%, but not by spanking. There's other ways. If a child's going to do something wrong, it's best to try and make the child look away from where it's going, and then try and sit down with the child and explain it to him clearly.
Yeah.
It's hard for a 3-year-old, of course it is, but spanking personally for me, I went to a grammar school.
Yeah.
I had the cane, I had the slipper, I had the whole lot.
Yeah.
Personally, when you go to school, then obviously grammar school, it basically puts fear into you, so you don't do it. I understand the principle of it.
Yeah.
But for a parent to spank, sometimes I lose my temper because obviously the child's really doing it. But I wouldn't go out to spank, because when do you stop? When you trigger, that's spanking, Nigel.
Well, I think, Carl, I think that the vast majority of parents who smack their children over the back of the legs exercise that very sensibly and with discretion, and those that don't, who maybe have anger management problems or whatever it is, wouldn't actually obey this law anyway. And so the argument, Carl, I guess that I'm making is whether you agree with smacking children or not, and you clearly don't, and you think you can win respect without doing that, and if you can, well, so much the better, absolutely. But the question, Carl, really is, should the state be legislating on this? That's the question I'm asking.
Well, totally, I agree with you there, Nigel. I don't think the state should have any... the state should have a say up to a point.
Yes.
They do go over the point with everything. I agree with your smoking comments. Totally, I do. I've been to Holland. I've been around Europe. I'm totally with you on Brexit here.
Yeah. Or Spain, actually, is my favourite. Spain's the best. Because the Spanish haven't changed the smoking law. So you say, excuse me, can I smoke? You know, you're sitting in the corner of the restaurant. They say, oh, no, smoking's not allowed, but you can have an ashtray if you want one. So that's a very sort of Mediterranean way of dealing with it. Carl, listen, I do absolutely respect what you say, but it's interesting. You disagree with smacking children, absolutely, and you feel it very strongly, and yet, at the same time, you don't want government to interfere too much and legislate. I thank you very much indeed for your call. Joanna in Mortlake, what do you think about smacking children and big government?
Hello, good morning. I've been listening to you with great interest over the last couple of nights. Anyway, smacking. I think it's quite a good idea. I think it'll help the sort of middle ground of parents who perhaps smack without thinking about it, because I never smack my children. There's no need. You've got words, you've got looks, glances. You know, why do you need to smack a child? I mean, if an adult smacked me, what would I do? Is that right? Is that legal? I mean, you don't smack people or children.
Well, the argument...
Why would you smack a child on the legs, for instance? I mean, that's sort of really working out where to actually hit the child. I would have thought if somebody did in anger, you'd sort of just whack out. But that sounds as though you're really thinking about it. It makes you really quite angry, actually.
Yeah, I think most parents that smack their children actually do think about it, Joanna.
Why don't you just speak instead?
Because perhaps there are some children who will respond better to a little bit of fear. I don't know. I don't know.
Because they've been smacked, they might do. Yes.
Yes. Well, that's the point, isn't it? Because they've been smacked, they might not do something again because they don't want it to happen again.
No, you haven't misunderstood my point. They might respond to a smack if they've been smacked before and therefore frightened.
That's possible too. That's possible too. I mean, Joanna, there are big debates around this, and there are huge changes in society's attitudes, aren't there, towards this issue? You know, spare the rod and spoil the child 100 years ago was something that was believed through most sections of society. That is not believed any longer today. And probably, I would guess probably, half of parents of the population right now would, Joanna, be like you and Carl, our previous caller. There are no circumstances in which they would, or ever did, smack their children. And I completely get that, and I completely understand that. The question is, should the state be getting involved in this? And I don't know the answer to that, and I think we've managed to lose that telephone line, which is in some ways convenient, because this is Nigel Farage and LBC, where the time is now 12:15.
LBC. The LBC Podcast app.
Download the LBC Podcast app and access all your favourite LBC shows and presenters.
Should we just blame Corbyn and say he's useless? He's got no concept of how to lead.
Anytime.
If you get drunk and you need accident emergency and you go by ambulance, let's just charge them.
Any place.
Are you in favour of no controls or some controls?
Well, I'm in favour, clearly, of some controls.
Some controls. That's not what Jeremy Corbyn says.
The LBC Podcast app. For all the details, go to lbc.co.uk.
Before I did my tax return, I was so tense. I couldn't see the wood for the trees. But now, well, I can see the wood, the trees, and an old weasel asleep in a hedge.
You too can find inner peace. Do your tax return online by the 31st of January and avoid a £100 penalty. Go to gov.uk/self-assessment and don't forget to pay what you owe.
From working 9 to 5 to working on your tan. Experience the best of Asia, Australia and New Zealand with Singapore Airlines. With great fares to Thailand, the Philippines, Australia and more, there's no better time to plan your next getaway. Book now at singaporeair.com. Singapore Airlines, a great way to fly.
Have you seen my keys anywhere?
Are they in the dining room?
Nope.
Library?
Nope.
Indoor pool?
Nope.
Outdoor pool?
Nope.
Tennis courts?
Ah, nicer problems to have. This Friday there's a £31 million jackpot and 2 guaranteed UK millionaires. Euro Millions. Only from the National Lottery. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Nigel Farage on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
There's a real possibility that the Welsh First Minister, Carwyn Jones, will have the power to introduce legislation to ban people from smacking their children, to make it illegal, make it a criminal offence, even in their own homes, and even if they're tourists visiting Wales or, English people on a day out. And we've been debating, is it right to smack children? Is it wrong to smack children? We've been talking about degrees of that. But I think, for me, I really question whether the state is not taking its power way too far with issues like this and smoking bans and hunting bans and everything else, and it's trying to regulate absolutely every aspect of our behaviour. I think it's going too far. I don't believe this law, if it comes in, will do any good at all, and I certainly don't believe it will help in any way to stop genuine physical and sexual child abuse. But if you think I'm wrong, please come on the phone and tell me. And certainly, on the texts and tweets, there are some pretty strong opinions coming through. One here: smacking a child is nothing but evil and just wrong. It's child abuse. Anyone who thinks it's okay to hit a child needs their heads looked at. Well, I would suggest that it's a question of how we define the word hit. Another one: it will make a difference. It will criminalise decent parents who, in a moment of stress, lose their best judgment. It's the nanny state at its worst, says Michael. It's becoming a police state. Kids have no respect, and it will get worse. And the last one here is in from James, who says, since around 1990, discipline has gradually eroded. Since then, behaviour in society has massively deteriorated. Why can't people join the dots? So, very strong opinions on this, on both sides of the argument, and I wonder what Mark in Birmingham thinks.
Hello, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call. What a pleasure to hear you on the radio. And literally, my neighbours, a lot of my neighbours, if they knew I was talking to you in Birmingham, they'd be like dancing in the streets. You are a legend.
Oh, dancing in a good way, not a bad way. Wow, how about that?
Of course, Nigel. I'm pretty much like you. I'm old school. If I misbehaved at home or at school, my father would slap me because it was a punishment. And you know what? I had, and I grew up with, which a lot of kids these days don't have, unfortunately. I grew up with respect for people. I had respect for the police. I had respect for teachers. And I had respect for people, simply for the fact that if I misbehaved and I was naughty, I would be punished. It acted as a deterrent. And it worked for me because I had something that a lot of these young kids can't understand these days. They couldn't even spell respect, let alone understand it.
So, Mark, you're arguing that actually a little bit of fear, not living in terror, but you're arguing that a little bit of fear in kids that are growing up actually makes them behave better and turn out better adults.
Absolutely, of course it does. If I misbehaved at school or I said the wrong thing to somebody, I'd get the cane or I'd get the deterrent. I knew it was a deterrent, and I knew sitting outside the headmaster's office, I was in for the punishment. I deserved it. I did the crime and I had the punishment.
Yes.
So next time I wouldn't do it. It was as simple as that. And let me tell you this, Nigel. I was in a supermarket, Asda store, the other day. There was a child who was screaming at his mother. He must have been, 3 or 4, something like that. And he was screaming, I want the toy, I want the toy. And he pulled half the toys off the shelf. And the mother restrained the little boy. She smacked him on the leg. Yeah. He sat down, sucked his thumb, and he was fine after that. He got back in his pushchair, and it was fine because it was a little bit of a deterrent, a little bit of a slap on the leg.
But it wasn't that fine, Mark, was it? Because who put
nothing wrong?
Who put the toys back, Mark?
well, I picked the one up because I felt so sorry for the woman anyway. But you just understand these things. But these do-gooders jump on the bandwagon. Oh, it's unacceptable to smack people. But there are degrees, and sometimes you have to. You have to correct them because otherwise they won't know they've done wrong in the first place.
Mark, I do understand much of what you're saying here, but I do also think that corporal punishment at schools, for example, which is banned now, but, you and I grew up with it, but I do think there were times when it could be overused, and that, I think, was a bad thing. There was an incident that happened at my school, and we were 14, and I can't remember who, but somebody bought a couple of bottles of whiskey in, you see, and 8:30 that morning, sort of round the back of the building, we're all drinking this whiskey. Well, that all would have been fine, I think, if Winterbourne hadn't collapsed off his chair during morning registration. And we shouldn't laugh, really. We really shouldn't laugh, should we? It's dreadful. Anyway, poor old Winterbourne was carted off to King's Hospital and stomach pumped and goodness knows what else. So there's a hell of a furore over it, Mark, And anyway, we all got called in to the headmaster, who just asked us a straight question. Were you involved with the distribution and drinking of this whiskey? And I said, well, yeah. I said, I only had a tiny amount. I said, there's probably more alcohol in a can of shandy in the school shop. But anyway, that's fine. So 6 people were absolutely collared for this. 6 of us were guilty, and 6 of us were to be caned. And I generally been in quite a lot of trouble for quite a lot of things, much, much more than the others who were involved in this or it was a little bit of a scandal, I guess. Anyway, so 9 o'clock, we have to report to the headmaster's office, and there are 6 of us. And he says, right, line up over there, boys. Farage, I want you last. I want you at the back of the... I thought, oh, my goodness gracious me. I mean, this does not look good. Now, if I'm honest about it, when they cane people, they really did cane people. I mean, it was 6 of the best. And so, one after another, these co-conspirators came out of the study And, I mean, they could hardly walk. And I thought, crikey, you know, I'm last. So I go in, Mark, and he says to me, well, Farage, he said, as ever, you're a very great problem to me. And I said, why is that, sir? He said, because unlike the others who all lied to me, you told me the truth. And much as I would like to cane you for this and many other things, I'm going to have to let you go as an example to the rest of the school that honesty pays. How about that? That wasn't bad, was it? So,
fantastic. I don't know what school you went to, Nigel, but it sounds like you had a whale of a time.
Well, I didn't have every day, Mark. But the point I'm making is that I think when I was at school, I can't think that people got caned more than once or twice a term. You know, you really had to do. You really had to do something that was bad for the cane to be used, and it was very, very sparing.
Nigel, I had they brought the slipper in. I don't know if you've heard of the slipper.
Yeah.
And I sort of played truant one day, was caught out, and I went to the headmaster's office, and they called it slipper, so he slippered me. And I've got to say, for a couple of hours, you know, it was very painful. But I tell you one thing, I never did it again. Because I didn't want the slipper and the humiliation of waiting outside the headmaster's office, and it was a deterrent. And that's what it's all about. A little bit of a deterrent just puts people off, and it makes people think. Nowadays, I bet if you went into any school, the pupils do not have any respect for the teachers. The teachers are scared of the pupils because the teachers cannot...
Well, that may be right. Mark, you know, you make the traditional argument on this, and you make it very, very well. There are others who feel equally passionately on the other side. The point is, I think, government butt out. And I wonder what Clark in Oxford makes of this debate. Clark, good morning.
Hello, good morning, Nigel. So, yes, I think that when I remember my school days, those teachers whom we respected the most were teachers who didn't rule through fear, who didn't rule through violence. We just had respect for them because of their attitude, their compassion, their motivation to teach us and to do the best for us.
Yes.
And I somehow feel that I have two kids also, and I would teach them self-control. It must come from within. And I honestly have never had the need to smack them, not once. And I feel that, you know, maybe if as a society we were a bit more spiritual, maybe, or, you know, we were more compassionate, there just wouldn't be the need for this through smart and logical arguments. You know, you work with the children to gain their respect, and that way they'll follow you and they'll look up to you. You'll be their mentor rather than ruling by fear. And my final point is, I just can't help but notice when I see parents smacking kids, it's usually the parents from the poorer segments of society who are less well educated. And I'm not trying to, you know, sound elitist about this, but I just somehow feel that, you know, that's something I've noticed. There's a pattern to it.
Well,
and I just feel it's totally unnecessary.
Well, no, you know, you are the contrast to the previous caller. You think that actually... we've had other callers say the same thing, that winning respect's what matters. Clark, I'm going to let you go. That line is pretty dodgy. And I'm going to move on to David in Norwich. David, hello. What are your experiences of this?
Good evening, boss. How are you?
I'm very well.
Right, number one, this is a non-political comment, even though I am a PPC for UKIP.
Right.
Political. Hi, good evening, sir. Number one, it's a previous, before midnight, is that as an ex-soldier, I personally believe that Mr. Blair should have been charged with treason. That's my view, end of. But getting on to the...
Moving on, yes.
Moving on. Okay, as a kid, back in the 60s or so, the 50s or so, 60s, I was given the cane, I was given the slipper, I was basically looked after a kid as I should have been. And that made me understand that what I should be doing is doing as I'm told, not doing as I believe I think I want to do as I'm told. And I understood that, I learned that, I went on to be a policeman, and I became a really good guy. But today, it just seems to me that if you tell your kids off, God, you can't say that, you can't tell them this, you can't do that. It's just so wrong, which is why kids now are doing what they've been doing. Act as they want to do, behave as they want to do, and no one seems to stand up and say a word about it, which is, to me, utter madness.
So, David, you're of the school that I was beaten, but it never did me any harm. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it didn't do us any harm. It actually did me a lot of good because I thought, gee, I've had the cane 2 or 3 times as a kid. Wow, blimey, I'm not going to do that again. Or I had the slipper. Well, the slipper, you have a hockey boot. You have that whacked across your backside and so on. I mean, you know what you're doing. And you think, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. And then you learn, you understand, you realise you just cannot do what you want to do.
David, do you think that sort of young teenagers in the high streets of Britain today behave with less respect towards adults and each other than they did in the 1960s and 70s?
Absolutely. They got no respect whatsoever. Today is a different world, a different situation. I mean, I was a Metropolitan Police officer for 20 years, and I look at the way now that the police are treated in London, the way they respect. Yeah. There's no respect.
Yeah, I mean that may be broader, David. That may well be broader than just the issue of whether people are smacked or not. But it equally could be a factor. David, thank you very much for your call. We are discussing whether smacking is right or wrong, but more importantly, I'm trying to discuss whether the state should have the power to ban it and to stop us smoking in the back room of our pub and to stop those who want to go and jump over hedges and hunt foxes from doing things. Has the state got too much power? That's what I want to know. I'm Nigel Farage on LBC. It's 12:30. Here with the news headlines is Zora Suleiman.
Theresa May will visit Donald Trump next month. In December, the Prime Minister's closest aides went to Washington to meet members of the President-elect's team. Talks aimed at averting a crippling strike by London Underground workers will continue later today. The 24-hour walkout will start at 6 p.m. on Sunday night. And 1 in 5 drivers would volunteer to fill in potholes for councils. The survey by motoring group the AA comes after the Local Government Association claims it would take 14 years to fix all the UK's potholes at a cost of £12 billion. LBC's weather: rain in northern parts into the evening, dry elsewhere with some frost, a low tonight of -2 degrees.
This is LBC.
Here's one for Alessia Sanazaro, co-founder of Chuzik. Her app finds beats for happy feet. She's rocking her own business here, but every leading lady needs backup. And by GoDaddy, she found it. With domain and web hosting to put her business online, now she's got investors putting their hands up in the air.
Go Chuzik, GoDaddy. Taking your business online.
This wine is giving me lots of earth. Strong notes of forest floor. Bits of rubble. And down in the distance, a great white stallion calling out to its mate. Yes, a most complex wine.
Put a cork in it. For wine without the fat, order at redorwhitetonight.com. Our experts make suggestions based on what you like, so the only choice you have to make is red or white tonight. Always drink responsibly.
Vodafone's biggest ever winter sale is now on. Treat yourself to great savings on big brands, with 6 months half price on selected pay monthly bundles, plus up to 50% off pay-as-you-go phones and home broadband connection fees. Discover in store or search Vodafone Winter Sale. Vodafone, power to you.
Minimum term agreements and credit check may apply. Sale ends 31st of the 1st 17 while stocks last. Broadband subject to availability, acceptance and delivery charges.
This is LBC with Nigel Farage. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
Should smacking be banned? It may be banned in Wales at some point in time. Should the state have the power to do this? Texts and tweets coming in. A gentle smack on a toddler when warranted should not be illegal. I wouldn't advocate spanking or worse, from Hayes in Cheshire. So someone there arguing that it is about degrees. If an adult hitting an adult is assault, then an adult hitting a child is abuse. End of the debate. David from Addleston. So, there are strong arguments against this ever being used, strong arguments that actually it's good for discipline. The moderates in the middle saying, well, a smack on the back of the legs is okay, but any more is awful. Nobody, and I want to hear from somebody telling me that this legislation will be good for children and will actually cut down on genuine, awful, physical and sexual child abuse. I'm going to go now to Desmond in Haywards Heath in Sussex. And Desmond, what are your views on the smacking of children and the ability of the state to legislate on it? Hello?
Well, Nigel, hello.
Yes, hello.
I'm very pleased to speak to you. I agree with some of your things that you said over the time in politics, but unfortunately, the party behind you is lacking. My views on this subject is total disgrace. There's no way that you should ever smack a child. And from experience, I was smacked as a child, and 16 years later, I still don't speak to my stepmother because she used to smack me. Now, I have forged a very successful career in my field. I have a daughter. All I can say is to parents out there, look at your child and look them in the eye, smack your child. After you smack them, how do you feel? You probably feel the lowest you've ever felt. There's no need. I agree with a lady caller earlier in the day, about half an hour ago, who said there's no need to smack a child. I agree 100%. You can chastise a child with words, with a look, with a manner of your... But you do not need to ever smack a child. It should be law. We should follow the Scandinavian model and never, ever smack a child. It's a disgrace in humanity.
Well, now, that may be coming, Desmond. That may be coming sooner than you think, because, you know, if the Welsh Assembly do it, then it probably won't be very long before the Scottish Parliament does it, and this is how these things happen. Can I just ask you, Desmond, and you haven't got to answer this, obviously, but you say you were smacked as a child. I mean, was that in a very strong physical way or in a minor way, or doesn't it matter as far as you're concerned?
No, it was in a minor way.
Right.
It was in a minor way, but the effect on me was not physical, it was more psychological. And that is the problem with smacking a child. It's not a physical manner or a physical detrimental aspect to the victim. It's a psychological, and for me, it was psychological.
But Desmond, I've got Desmond, I've got caller after caller telling me that proportional smacking actually taught them the boundaries and made them better and more disciplined people.
I think they're kidding themselves, and they're letting down their children, in my opinion. And I'm a victim of smacking. I will never condone it. If you have to smack your child, you're a weak parent.
Yeah, OK. No, Desmond, you are the strongest caller we had on this. You think the government should legislate. You think it's abhorrent. And I completely, absolutely get your view. Make no question about that. I wonder what Patrick in Ealing thinks about this. Patrick, good morning.
Good morning. I kind of agree with your last caller, to be honest.
Yeah.
But only because, like, in my personal experience, like, I was never hit by my parents or teachers, just because I was kind of... By the time I was 5, I was a bit too big to be handled that way. I can even remember times when I'd done stuff with other pupils. They got slippered. I got a detention.
Yeah.
Just because by the age of 9 or 10, I was like 5'9", 10, which makes me think, really, that's why you hit children, because they're smaller than you. If you see what I mean.
OK, but Patrick, whatever the rights or wrongs of smacking children, do you really think that if the Welsh Assembly makes this law, that it will actually protect children?
The law bit of it, I'm kind of... That's a bit debatable, because obviously there might be one or two circumstances when really you haven't got any choice. But like I said, I can only go by my own personal experience.
Oh, sure.
And I know I can remember times where teachers was thinking about it, and they looked at me and I looked at them, and they knew, even when I was like 8 or 9, if they'd have tried, they would have got unstuck. So I got a detention, which I think and obviously that's the way the world works, isn't it? If your child does something wrong, even when they're 5 or 6, again, I kind of go by, I haven't got any kids, but ex's kids, and like they wanted to smack them, and I just say to them, well, just don't take away his PlayStation.
Yeah, or when they're 10, take away the mobile phone for half an hour, you know.
Well, not for half an hour. I mean, like 2-3 days. But I noticed that for them it was like a drama.
Yeah.
And I guess for a lot of people, it's much easier just to smack the kids. You say your piece, and then it's kind of in your mind it's done.
You may be right.
And obviously,
you may be right, Patrick. There may be a combination of sort of temper and a lack of patience that leads people to smack children. That's really what you're saying, isn't it?
Yes, and obviously, if it's your child, you've brought them into the world, so really, you should make the effort to spend time with them, and you don't have to do that stuff, because, you know, I can think of my friends that have got children.
Yeah.
They don't smack them. It's just like, well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm taking away your console controller. You're not doing this week. You're not doing that. You're grounded for X amount of days. You're not seeing your friends. You're not getting pocket money. Whatever it is. And it might not work straight away, but after a while, you know, it's like anyone. If you're at work, if you do something wrong, you know, you might get fired, or you know, your wages might go down. That's going to properly make you think about things rather than you being scared.
Yeah. Patrick, you've made your points beautifully. Thank you very much indeed. Patrick telling us that actually taking away a kid's PlayStation, taking away a kid's mobile phone, stopping a kid going to see their friends, that would hurt them and make them really worried far more, actually, than being smacked. And he may have a very, very powerful point. I keep trying to get to this. Should the government have the power to do this? And I am now getting some texts and tweets coming in here. The state has gone far too long. Reel it in, Nigel, and then cut the line. Good idea. The government just wants to interfere in people's lives. I'm 16 years old, and I've grown up having respect for everyone. If you have to be beaten, it's simply bad parenting. That's what Niall says. So, strong views either way. Terry in Brighton, what do you make of this debate?
I think it's quite interesting, actually, because as I'm 32, but I was brought up the old-fashioned way by my dad. And so I must admit I got a couple of... I think I only ever got one spanking, which was far enough. He actually had a cane above the door. All he ever had to do was go 1, 2, and you never let him get to 3.
Right.
So it's, you know, it brought me up to know what was basically right from wrong, and it taught me to respect. On the other side of it, my mum basically used to try doing it the other way, you know, talking to you and you know, then raising the voice and the glances and that. But the only time I've ever felt I needed to defend myself was when my mum actually lost it. And if you're a youngster and you have got someone physically shouting and screaming at you, I would say that's a lot scarier than someone's basically just giving you a slap on the back of the leg or on the hand.
Yes, I think that's true. But, Terry, what you're really saying is that it wasn't the use of smacking that kept you in line, it was the fear that it might be used. That's the argument you're making, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, you always I think every child pushes the boundaries, whereas if it's, I'll go on the naughty step, you know, that's not a punishment to anyone. My sister's son had, when we were up at my dad's place, had this fascination with a very old magnifying glass that he's got. And he kept picking it up, and he, you know, it kept being, oh, put that down, oh, go on the naughty step, do this, do that. And the kid was out of control. And one day, my dad, literally, he was reaching for it. My dad just slapped him gently on the back of the wrist, back of the hand. He looked absolutely shocked, you know. And he never did it again. And it wasn't a hard slap. It was just, you know, it brought him up short. I'm not allowed to do that. And, yeah, I basically, anyone that says you don't have to smack a child, I understand their opinion and I can respect that. But, you know, look at the amount of people that are out there which have no respect for anyone else, and you tell me, you know, is it better now or is it better back in my dad's day when they did have respect?
Yeah, and so, Terry, you would not support a law coming in that banned this?
Oh, no. I mean, I agree with a lot of the other people. It's gone way too far.
Yeah.
You know, I think if people are intelligent enough to make their own decisions, obviously when it gets to beating and, you know, going to that extent, then yes, there should be laws. But
this is, yeah. There's a huge difference, Terry, between child abuse and appropriate smacking. At least I think there is. Not all of our callers do. Terry, I thank you for your call. We are discussing whether the Welsh Assembly should make it illegal for parents to smack their children, even at home, or even visitors or tourists. And I'd like to hear your opinion for the last 15 minutes on this. Do call us on 0345 6060973. Text us on 84850. Tweet at us at LBC. This is Nigel Farage on LBC, and the time is 12:45.
This is LBC. Coming up at 1 on LBC, Darren Adam.
Stalkers will face longer jail terms under a drive to toughen punishments handed out to those responsible for the most devastating campaigns of harassment. Is there a sign that we're now taking the crime of stalking seriously enough? Or do you think there's more still to do?
Leading Britain's conversation, Darren Adam. This morning from 1 on LBC.
When we make the right decision once, life can be a lot simpler. That's why we created Flipper. One simple decision that means you never overpay for energy. Throughout the year, we compare energy tariffs on your behalf and flip you onto the best deal. Sign up once, pay a flat fee once a year, and put energy bills out of your mind once and for all. Sign up now at flippercommunity.com and never overpay for energy again. Auto renewal after 1 year. Conditions apply.
It's amazing what you have at your fingertips. Emails, photos, banking. Yeah, your smart devices keep getting smarter. But so do all those cyber criminals. They keep coming up with new ways to get at the personal things on your phone, tablet and computer. To keep them secure, always download the latest software and app updates. They contain important security upgrades which help protect your device from nasty viruses and hackers. Be cyber aware. Visit cyberaware.gov.uk.
I'm Dr. Michael Zibbets, Senior Clinician at TDC Dental Implants. People have asked whether we really can give you fixed teeth on implants in just 1 day. Yes, we can.
I was here in the morning about 8 o'clock and I was home by sort of 4 in the afternoon.
In just 1 day, we'll give you a full set of beautiful teeth fixed in your mouth.
Obviously, I smile a lot more than I used to, and I don't sit with my hand across my mouth anymore.
Around 3 months later, we exchange your fixed teeth for a new permanent set.
To be honest with you, it's the best thing that I've ever done.
It's like having natural teeth.
For details, visit smileinaday.co.uk or call TDC Harley Street on 0203 7334 986.
Nigel Farage on LBC.
Hasn't the state got too much control over our lives, and now they're even talking in Wales about bringing in a law to ban people smacking their kids, even at home? I have to say, I've listened to the argument on to smack or not to smack. An amazing passion on both sides of the argument. I guess this is an issue that every single family in the land not only talks about, but I bet very often there are disagreements between partners as to what the right course of action is. I'm going to take more calls on whether you think it's right or wrong to smack children, but I particularly think this aspect of the government, should they have the power to do this? That's what really, really interests me. And I'm going to ask Omar in East Ham what he thinks about these questions.
Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
I just wanted to say, first of all, that I really admire you. Thank you for opening our eyes for Brexit.
Thank you.
I'm a fellow Brexiteer, and it really means a lot. So thank you very much for what you've done.
Thank you.
But answering your questions, no, I think the Welsh Assembly is going too far. They shouldn't legislate on this. There are some things better left for the parents to deal with. And personally, I had the whole works. I was slippered at school. I was caned at school. I was smacked at home by my mum. I faced the eyeballing, and the change in tone in her voice when I was overstepping the line. Yes. So the thing is that was at that time the punishment that I faced for crossing the line. Now today I'm a father of two. What I do is that I never needed to smack my children, but I did tell them that, listen, if you cross this line, if you persistently and choose not to listen, then this is what's going to happen to you. And for me, I guess I was lucky. My children always listen. I never needed to smack them. But I did use that as a...
So the threat was there. The threat was there, then, Omar. Yeah.
The check was there, and it was used as a deterrent to stop them from overstepping that line. And I suppose I was a lucky parent. I never needed to smack my children. And
Lucky?
They always,
Lucky?
At the end of the day.
You weren't lucky, Omar. You were a good parent, surely.
Well, no, but the thing is that I've got other friends. I've got other friends who did need to smack their children once in a while, not all the time.
Yeah.
But personally, I never had to do it. So, it worked out. Although I faced the whole works when I was young, I never needed to do it to my children. But I did use it as a deterrent to stop them from overstepping that line.
And you think parents, and you would presumably argue, Omar, that parents need that ability as a last resort to use some form of mild corporal punishment, and the state should butt out.
Exactly, and if you think about it, that principle, using it as a last resort, we have it in everywhere in our lives. I mean, like if you break the law, committing a criminal offence, I mean, you're going to face some sort of punishment.
Yes.
If you're, even in a civil case, you're breaking the law, you're going to get some sort of fine. You're going to have to pay some sort of damages or something. So that principle has always got to be, and that principle has got to be there all the time. That it can be used as a deterrent, but. It's always used as a last resort. We have to, explore other options to see what can be done. But if everything has been exercised reasonably, and there was nothing left to do except to go down the smacking route, then I think a parent should be allowed to do so.
Thank you.
But it should only be done as the very last resort.
Thank you. Well, it wasn't a last resort with you when you were growing up. It sounds like you received almost every form of cane and slipper that existed. But you, clearly, the deterrent for you with your children in your particular case, and come on, let's be honest, all children are different, but it's worked for you, Omar. Brendan in Kent, what do you think, Brendan?
Evening. Oh, morning, actually.
It's morning. I know, it really is.
As a child, I was never smacked, but I wouldn't call it a threat. The deterrent was there. I was told that if I didn't behave, then I would get a ding of the ear, which didn't do me any harm because, you learnt the respect that there was going to be consequences to your actions.
Yes.
But the point I really wanted to make was, say, for example, if this ban did come into force, which I don't think it should, and say I was on holiday in Wales with my family, I've got an 11-year-old son and a 3-month-old daughter. If, say, for example, we were out and my son was about to put his hand on something sharp and I shouted, no, but as a last act as a deterrent, I was to slap his hand out of the way of it, and someone who thought they were a do-gooding citizen reported me, under this ban, would I then be wrong? Would I be,
you would have
in trouble for what I did?
Yes, because Brendan, you'd been reported, and it would be someone's word against yours. But given the world we live in now, the CCTV virtually everywhere, and they'd find CCTV evidence of you tapping a child over the back of the leg, and you would probably, I'm guessing, I haven't seen the shape of the legislation yet, but you would, I guess, get a criminal record. Which frankly, is too much, isn't it?
It would, because I would much rather, say, for example, my son was going to put his hand on something sharp, and I tapped his hand to get his hand away from that sharp object, I would rather do that any day of the week than him end up stabbing his hand. Or if, say, my daughter, when she's a little bit older, goes near the hot cooker and she doesn't listen to no, or she doesn't really understand no, I would rather tap her hand out of the way than rather take her to hospital and then explain why my daughter's got burns.
Brendan, whether you smack children or not, there are times when you do have to restrain them, and you really do as a parent, and you do it for their own good. But Brendan, your call again is interesting, because you're somebody who wasn't smacked as a child, but the threat was there, and the threat clearly worried you, didn't it?
But I don't think that it is down to the government that they should be able to legislate this, because to me it is a step too far.
I couldn't agree.
As you say,
I couldn't agree more.
Smoking ban, I had the same situation as you the other day. I went and bought some tobacco, and the guy in the shop couldn't find what I wanted because of the colour of the packet.
I know, it's bonkers, isn't it?
To me, I don't care if my tobacco packet is pink with bows on.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't really get what good that does. And locking it away in the cabinet out of sight, well, it doesn't stop me from smoking because I still know it's there and I know what I want anyway.
Yeah. No, Brendan, super. Thank you very much indeed for your call. We're going to go to Kevin in Belfast. Kevin, what about smacking? Good or bad, and what should the government do?
Well, first of all, Mr. Farage, it's an honour speaking to you. I'm a big fan of yours.
Thank you.
Although I don't agree with you on everything. I would,
well, of course, Kevin, of course you don't. No two intelligent human beings could ever agree with each other on everything. It literally is impossible.
Well, thank you. But yes, I was calling in to discuss the idea of the whole concept of progressive discipline, and I feel like it doesn't work. I feel like sending children to the naughty corner or taking away something from them, I feel like it doesn't work, because I'm an 18-year-old. I was brought up with a, shall we say, more disciplinarian father and a more liberal mother.
Yep.
And I always felt that I was more... My father's discipline always acted as more of a deterrent to my bad behaviour than... And no offence, I mean no disrespect to my mother, but I feel like I was always under more control by my father than I was by my mother. And it's just personal experience. I felt that I was more controlled by the more harsh forms of discipline. But yes, in the argument of whether the state has the right to infringe upon a parent's rights to hit their child, I don't think they do. I think it's state control gone too far, and I think that's something which, what's the word? That people have begun to... There's been a backlash against state control.
Well, I hope so, Kevin. I hope so, Kevin. I'm not entirely sure.
I feel like it's just because you have the rise of what's the word? The whole concept of the extreme social left.
Yeah, I know.
I know. Yeah, you know what I mean?
And they want to change our behaviour in every way, don't they? No, I agree. No, Kevin, listen, thank you. Thank you for that. A very useful call. Big debate on this issue. I really wasn't sure quite how many people would talk about it, and still more texts and tweets coming in. What I love here. Hi, Nigel. I do concur with the Welsh Assembly overreaching in family affairs. Congrats on your show. Hearing you shaving in Las Vegas, and that's from Darren. That's not bad. Well, don't forget they're 8 hours behind, so it is kind of shaving time, I guess, in Las Vegas. What do I conclude from all of this? I have to say, I conclude that bad legislation is to make laws that can't be enforced. It's to make laws that won't be respected by large numbers of people. It's to make laws, frankly, for the sake of making laws and virtue signalling out to the rest of the world. I do not believe any single child will be protected if this smacking law comes in, because child abuse will still continue. I suspect vast amounts of police time will get wasted. I do think that parents have the right to smack their children. I do personally think there are circumstances in which that is the right thing to do, but I completely respect all the arguments that were made on both sides of this debate. I've been doing this for the last 4 nights. I have to say, I've been feeling a little bit weary, but thank you all. It's been a lot of fun. Ian Collins is back on Sunday night from 10. I'll be back on Monday at 7 o'clock for a different new show, so please join me then. It'll be fun. Leading Britain's Conversation at 4, it's Steve Allen, but next on LBC, it's Darren Adam.
Thank you very much. Later.